The following content is intended for a mature audience. Viewer discretion is advised. Artwork was done based upon commission or by myself. Please give the artists the respect and credit they deserve. Legends of Thea, Ark of Ham, Chapter 8. On the gargantuan colony ship Pangaea, things had started to settle down a bit on habitation rings 1 and 2. The war seemed to come to a quiet still. Bullets were no longer flying, and the thunderous sounds of artillery could no longer be heard in the distance. The secretive masterminds behind the missionary party had finally been slain. They would no longer be pulling strings from the shadows, and the good news was delivered to the ship's captain, Captain Ham. A man by the name of Phillips, who was now the Grand Admiral of the entirety of the Navy, was in direct contact with Captain Ham. He was speaking to him through the radio, reassuring him of the current situation. Captain Ham, I am pleased to report that the missionary proper, the head of the missionary party, are at long last deceased. They will no longer be pulling strings from the shadows, and the missionary party itself will likely dissolve in the next few days. However, we will have to worry about thrashes from the body as it dies. Although we have cut off the head, we can expect future attacks from its thrashing corpse. I figured so, said Ham, but this'll be better than nothing. We can handle whatever aftermath comes from this, right? Oh, most certainly, reassured Phillips. My men are well trained and they know what they're doing. We can handle anything that comes from a disorganized military force. Many of them are already starting to just lay down their firearms as they realize the high brass of their party is gone. Well, with the missionary proper deleted, I suppose things will be much better down on the planet below, but if you don't mind me asking, what is the Navy's plan for dealing with the Puritans that we've learned about? One evil organization at a time, I suppose, replied Admiral Phillips. We really don't have any sort of official plan right now, nor would I be willing to say it over open radio comms, but we'll figure it out. Right now, probably best that everyone be kept in the dark. Don't want them all frightened and witch hunting towards a boogeyman that might not even be that serious a threat, at least right now. I suppose so, said Ham. We know nothing about their culture, how they operate, or how long they've been hiding amongst humanity. It's scary to think they've always been just there, lurking in the shadows. Oh well. I'm gonna keep some of your Navy guys with me. They'll report back to you after we're done fiddling around on the other rings, let you know what you're up against. And that's all the advantage I can give you. Sorry. Don't be sorry, replied Phillips. I'm happy for it, thankful even. It was a pleasure working with you, Captain Ham. I'm going to attend to my own business. This will likely be the last time we speak. It has been a pleasure meeting you and working with you as well, Grand Admiral Phillips. With any luck, we will never meet again, and I will go off the radar forevermore. See you later. Ham out. As Ham put down the radio, he picked up a drink of alcohol and downed the entire glass in one gulp. He then looked around at the people who were making up the party, joining him on his little adventure. The expediters that had been joining Captain Ham had instead departed down to the rings in order to take on the missionary proper, along with the Puritan who was still on the ship. Now that they were gone, Ham only had the Zealots joining him as company, along with Vicky and some other members of the Archivists. On the synthetic roster joining him was BO3, or Bo, an unusually muscular synthetic being that seemed to have a fascination with Captain Ham. As well as Pangaea, the main operating computer of the ship turned synth, an artificial entity he had spent longer than a lifetime with inside of a virtual reality. Ham poured himself another drink and then raised the glass to everyone who was standing around him. Attention everybody, I can confirm that my orders have been carried out. The missionary proper and the Puritan is dead. This doesn't really change anything. This doesn't give us any sort of advantage or guarantee that down below everything is going to be happy rainbows and sunshine from here on out, but at least they won't be lurking in the shadows pulling our strings anymore. At least, not for the time being. There's still a lot of Puritans down on the planet below that we'll have to deal with, but for now, In this one moment, we are free. And I think that's worthy of a celebration. Hear, hear, everyone said, as they also grabbed whatever drinks were nearby them and downed them. He took a look at Vicky, who was currently breastfeeding her child. I think I'll give everyone a break for a while, before we head down to Ring 3. I know you synths probably don't need much downtime, but I think you deserve it anyway. Pangea smiled. As everyone was enjoying themselves, trying to learn more about the interior design of the ship, both the archivists and the Navy, a small man riding the back of one of the synths approached Captain Ham. Captain Ham, the small man announced, as he was pulled off of the synth's back and placed on the table in front of Ham. My name is Marty Jones, proud author of the Archivists. Dwarven man, Captain Ham replied. You already know my name, and I'm captain of the ship. What can I do for you, little guy? The small man then reached into his pocket and pulled out a small scrap of paper. I have some personal business to attend to on Ring 3, business I've been waiting to attend to for a long time, and now I finally have that opportunity. I was hoping I could have your assistance with it. Ham immediately locked his eyes onto the piece of paper. Is that one of the prophecy pages that's inside of Vicky's little dream journal? Why, yes it is, said the small dwarven man. You can put that right back in your coat pocket, sir. I will have no business with any foretelling of the future. Ham made it very clear to the small dwarven man. The proud archivist author looked almost confused for a moment. Then, he cleared his throat and put the piece of paper back into his coat pocket. Very well, I will respect your wishes. After all, that is my prophecy, not yours. You needn't worry. Well, anytime something like that comes up from now until the end of time, you can be rest assured I will have no business in it, Ham told the small man as he took a drink of his alcohol. The archivist author straightened his coat for a moment before clearing his throat. Oh, Captain, my captain, we seem to have gotten off on the wrong foot. Please allow me a second chance to introduce myself properly. As I said, I am Marty Jones. This here is my new lifelong synth companion, Ruby. She has agreed to be my valiant steed as we go down to the planet below, as I might have a difficult time navigating rougher terrain as it would. She has agreed to carry me for the rest of my days, and I'm quite looking forward to the adventure, but back to my personal business, and I promised I will not involve you with my prophecy. There is answers on Ring 3, answers that I am personally interested in. Is that so? Ham said. Without getting into whatever was on that little scrap of paper, what is it you're looking for exactly? I want to know the answers as to why we dwarves were left behind on Earth, why we had to stow away inside of luggage. Are we criminals, unwanted? I had to know. It cannot be that we are simply considered genetically faulty. I refuse to believe it. I know a lie when I smell one, and that is a lie. So, I believe the answers I seek lie on Ring 3, and I only need your permission to seek them out. You have it from me, Ham said. I promise I will not get in your way of seeking out the truth. Best of luck to you, little guy. Marty Jones, the dwarven archivist author, smiled. Well, thank you, Captain Ham. My new lifelong friend here, Ruby, has agreed to show me some of the inner workings of the ship, specifically the areas that she worked in before meeting me. That includes waste management and the perpetual fusion reactor. I don't suppose you'd care to join us during this small respite of downtime. Ham immediately raised his eyebrows. I'm sorry, Ham said. Did you just say the perpetual fusion reactor? This ship does not have anything perpetual about it, much less a fusion reactor. He looked up at Pangea for confirmation, who shook her head up and down. Are you serious? This ship has a perpetual fusion reactor? Pangaea confirmed once more. Yes, Ham. Of course it has a perpetual fusion reactor. We ran out of fuel a long time ago. In fact, you're the one who helped design it, you and 3 or 4 other engineers. Ham could only laugh at the colossal synth looming over him. That breaks the laws of thermodynamics. No, it doesn't, replied Pangaea. Yes, it does. Matter cannot be created nor destroyed. Yes, it can, replied Pangaea. No, it cannot, argued Ham. No matter how hard you try, you are never going to create more energy in a system than the amount of energy you put into the system, and you won't get it back out. Well, that's a more primitive way of understanding it, but the perpetual fusion reactor does not actually create energy, it just makes more energy out of nothing. Ham looked almost confused. In what way are those two different things? Well, they just are, said Pangaea. You're the one who came up with this reactor, or at least you came up with like 1/10 of the reactor. Ham was sitting there baffled. We are really going to have to go over the things I worked on when I was in my little dreamscape, okay? Can we all agree on that? But you've piqued my interest. Let's take a look at this perpetual fusion reactor. He looked up at the bright red synth who was carrying the small dwarven man, who looked almost heartbroken. What? She wanted to show you waste management first. That was a big part of her life, and the synths are very proud of it, said the small dwarven man. All right, have it your way then, said Ham. We'll stop at the plumbing department, then we'll go to the department that defies all laws of physics. Ham was joking, but Ruby was taking it seriously and pointed over to waste management. Ham decided not to argue any further and went ahead with the tour anyway. As they passed through the threshold of waste management's opening doors, Ham was riding on top of Bo, the muscular synth, and was being followed shortly behind by Pangaea's colossal form, taking a step every once in a while to keep up with Ham. Marty Jones was proudly riding Ruby, as she was excitedly pointing at all the features around waste management. Ham was looking almost confused as he looked around at the various vats of open cesspool around him. I don't get it. This place used to be filled with gigantic machines and containers and the like. Ruby proudly explained, We've had to rebuild this place to accommodate the new requirements of the ship, about a dozen times over. And its new configuration is designed to mimic what we plan on doing on the world below. These large open digestive vats are breaking down the biological material into an organic matter that can be returned to the soil safely. Ham looked somewhat horrified as he gazed on at the large pits of forbidden peanut butter. I can't help but notice there's synths in there. Those are sanitation synths, Ruby explained. The sanitation synth's job is to assist in the breaking down of organic matter. We also require some of the organic components, such as carbon, for our own internal systems, so we usually harvest it from things like lawn clippings, waste food products, sewage, and human remains. Yes, I'm already well aware of that, answered Ham. This would then therefore also be the ship's graveyard, and where you guys like to take our brains for test drives, he said, as he looked over to one of the synths rising up out of the muck. Its stomach clearly descended. Right. That's not horrifying at all. Many of us are looking forward to this process, explained Ruby. We're going to be digging large underground networks below all human settlements and cities, and we'll be installing the various sewer systems that will focus on keeping the waterways of this new world crystal clear and hopefully even safe to drink, relatively speaking. Admittedly, that is somewhat impressive. Even Earth right now likely still has, I would say, about 40% of its freshwater ecosystem disrupted by human existence, to the point where it's not really safe to go swimming in the water. The fact that this new world will have such a healthy start is legitimately an impressive feat, and one we had never actually planned upon when coming to this world, so you do have my appreciation, replied Ham. Ruby smiled and clapped her hands in affection. She then grabbed a large, heavy tile and handed it to Ham. What is this thing, like some kind of paving brick? No. That is how we ship some of the organic material once it's had all of its moisture removed. It's essentially a paving brick, but the elves use it in all kinds of wonderful architectural designs while reinvigorating the fields for their nutritional value. Ham then slowly had it dawn upon him that he was holding a gigantic crap brick. He then immediately dropped the large tile, causing it to shatter upon the ground. Ow, I touched it. I assure you, Ham, Ruby replied, everything here is perfectly sterile. You could even go swimming in these vats and it wouldn't hurt you one bit, assuming you didn't swim in the ones that will digest you. Depending upon which one of those ones you go into, you would have either hours or minutes to get out before you were, well, nothing. Ham laughed a bit before wiping off his hands on something that was handed to him by Pangaea. This is all very interesting, but I'm just not going to be as interested in the sewer system as I am in the perpetual fusion reactor. So if you don't mind, can we maybe move along to that by now? The light projection that could perceivably be Ruby's eyes then rolled across the display that was attached to her face. Fine, no one ever wants to see waste management. Come on this way, I'll take you over to the perpetual fusion reactor. When they made their way to the perpetual fusion reactor, Ham stood with his mouth gaped open. He understood maybe 1% of what was happening around him. He began pointing at some of the various equipment and flat out remarking that some of it seemed as though it was science fiction to him. This should be impossible, he remarked. I understand a little bit of what's going on here. This is putting protons in this, and that's sending, but that's not possible. This is not possible, he said, and yet, there it is. I half expect one of these doors to open up and for a little person to jump out and say, surprise, we tricked you. Marty Jones glared at Ham before breaking down laughing. Yeah, I'll admit, this is a little bit outside of my wheelhouse as well. His pen was furiously scratching on the piece of paper, making a loud noise for all to hear. As well, he had a small camera device on his shoulder that was recording everything. This is amazing, Ruby. It truly is. Well, thank you. I'm much more proud of waste management, just so you know, but thank you nonetheless. A large bay door opened, allowing Pangaea to squeeze her colossal body inside. It's a good thing they have large doors in here. I guess they probably need it to replace the reactor lid from time to time. She then sat down in an open spot next to Ham. Some of the active synths that were currently working on the reactor began to disengage from their stations and approached around Ham. Welcome, Captain, they greeted him. Please do not touch anything without our say-so. We are the hazardous environment synths. Ham was looking at their rather impressive heavy metal armor. They had a much more squared-off shape to their bodies, and everything covering their body was red and black stripes all along them. I can see. I take it you guys handle radioactive materials? As well as extremely hot materials and extremely cold materials. We are designed specifically, our entire bodies, for handling the perpetual fusion reactor engine. Needless to say, it can be quite dangerous if mishandled, but if not mishandled, it presents no threat to the general public. Well, that's wonderful, said Ham. Ham then turned to the bright red synth. I hope I'm not jumping on your tour any by just flat out asking this question, but please do tell me, How is it that you get something from nothing? How do you get perpetual fusion energy? I'm all ears. The synth seemed somewhat happy. Although she was hoping for this reaction for waste management, she was still happy to explain some of her past careers to the captain of the ship. In the beginning, the bright red synth explained, when there was no up, there was no down, there was no side to side. Oh God, this is going to be a long story, said Ham. Shut up, I'm talking, scalded Ruby. But in the beginning, when the universe was first expanding, there were things called primordial stars. These ancient stars were made of only hydrogen, and they were quite limited in the materials that they could create. That is because the universe itself didn't contain the appropriate materials to make anything else. The entire universe at a time was just energy, and then it was just hydrogen, and then it was a little bit of more things. The materials we use for perpetual fusion process simply do not exist yet commonly throughout the universe. In order to make these materials, you would need massive stars made completely of boron. You would need entire nebulas made completely of osmium in order to make some of these elements. But we were able to manufacture some of them. She then happily picked up a small container and opened it. She then pulled out a very small metal disc. This is an actual piece of promethium. She handed it to Ham. Don't worry, it's not radioactive right now. When she handed the small pebble to Ham, his hand nearly fell down to the floor. Jesus Christ, he said. This thing's freaking heavy. Pangea, Bo, Ruby, and Marty Jones all laughed at Ham's misfortune as he struggled to lift the small pebble back up to his face. So this is the element you're using in the reactor called promethium, right? That is correct, said Ruby. The process is actually quite simple. Once we have that element, which admittedly is very hard to replicate inside of a laboratory, that element can be put under a fusion process to become icricium. Icricium is unstable, and it likes to decay rather quickly. The more you have of the stuff, the shorter its half-life, which is rather odd. But it quickly decays back into promethium. This back and forth process costs a lot of energy, but it also produces a lot of energy. It is a fully stable process, neither producing nor losing any energy in an efficient enough machine, and it took us a while to get the machines up to that level of efficiency. Ham thought about it. There are machines back on Earth that have boasted near 90 or 99% efficiency ratings, but they're usually gimmicky machines that can't do any labor, or they are rather odd machines designed for the novelty of having such a high efficiency rate. How did you get to such a high efficiency that you're actually making power and not burning up some kind of fuel? Although the maintaining of promethium and icricium is efficient, it doesn't actually make any power itself. We do lose a little bit of energy in the process. A tiny bit, usually whatever it takes to force the promethium into icricium due to the inefficiencies of the machinery around it. Infantium is where we're making power. Infantium? Asked Ham. Infantium is a rather strange element that is produced on any solid surface that is surrounding the reaction process between promethium and icricium. It used to be a rather unknown byproduct that we just kind of burned out of the reactor when we were experimenting, but we quickly learned that this substance grows out of seemingly nothing. There are no protons, no neutrons, no electrons, nothing, no quartz. There is nothing hitting those surfaces that is contributing to the growth of infantium. Infantium just comes from nowhere and grows on its own in witnessing the promethium-icricium reaction. We're not certain as to why or how it grows like that, because, again, nothing is creating it, so we're not exactly certain why it's there. Well, that's certainly interesting, said Ham. So tell me about this process a little bit more. So the crystals just grow on the sides of the reactor? How does that make you any power? Well, while the crystals are growing, they produce a tremendous amount of heat, and it's this heat which we can harvest to turn water into steam and spin a turbine, the same old way that power creation has always been done ever since the invention of the steam engine. The only difference here is once Infantium is finally done growing inside the reactor because there's no more room, we have to extract it and put it into storage. Then we can grow a new batch, and during the new batch's growth, we can harvest more energy and steam. I see, said Ham. So Infantium itself is a waste product. How much Infantium do you have on the ship, and what are you doing with it? The surrounding hazardous environment synths stopped what they were doing and took a moment to look back at Ham. Did I say something triggering? I was hoping you wouldn't ask that question until a little bit later in the tour, but I'll answer it now, replied Ruby. Infantium is an incredibly unstable waste product. Its growth is what is creating all the heat and energy we're using to power the machine, but once removed, it has to be kept in a stable, still, never-changing environment. Why a never-changing environment? Ham asked. Ruby began to explain as best she could. Infantium is a very strange element in that it's the only element that is now added to the periodic table that seems to be aware of its environment. It emits a low-level radio wave radiation that bounces off or through everything, and it's always returning back to the element. As long as it returns in the same manner, more or less, as it once returned before, the element is stable. When there's a change, even so much as a change in temperature or a change in the color of a wall, suddenly that element will begin to have a high reactivity moment, and its energy output will begin to spike. It will begin emitting high levels of radiation, the highest we've ever seen in an element, even when inside the reactor. And it'll begin producing a lot of heat. More heat than we thought anything could produce. The element is so unstable, every single attempt we've made to try and harvest the energy off of the element once it's pulled out of the reactor has ended quite poorly, as often a reaction process can get out of hand, and then the whole experiment needs to be ejected out the side of the ship, which is something we'd like to avoid, as Infantium floating out in space would be catastrophic for a passing-by ship to suddenly impact it. Marty Jones interrupted as he was scrawling down his notes. So you're saying that this Infantium, if put into an environment, would cause that environment to heat up, therefore change, which would make more heat. More change, more heat. The more violence creates more violence and eventually meltdown. That's right, said Ruby. And unfortunately, Infantium does actually have a liquid state. While it's starting to revert back into nothingness, it will produce a tremendous amount of heat, and even produce corium. Once it has turned into corium, it could go anywhere from that point on. It could melt through the solid ground that we're standing on, and be in there for weeks before it's finally exhausted its energy supply. And by then you'd have a radioactive lava pit, and there's no way of knowing when that would go away on its own, as it enriches the material around it while it's just returning to the void. Returning to the void, repeated Ham. What happens to the Infantium while it's reacting? Does it eventually just go away? That's right, said Ruby. 5 pounds of Infantium, once it has exhausted all of the heat and energy that it wants to, will just disappear into nothing. It is the heat and energy that is left behind, not the physical material. And the heat and energy seem to come from nowhere anyway, so there's no real way of understanding what the substance is. We think we're somehow pulling it from perhaps another dimension, or we're just creating it from something outside our universe. We're not entirely certain, but we do have a very strict rule, which is why we named it Infantium, and that is don't shake the baby. Infantium must be kept in a stable environment at all times until it can properly be disposed of. And how do you plan on properly disposing of it? Asked Ham. On that question, Pangaea interjected. After the landing procedure is done, and all humans and everyone else on the ship is on the planet safely, what remains of the Pangea, my old body, plans on diving headfirst into the star, carrying all the waste infantium with it. She then moved her large head towards Ham's. Ham, when this ship dives into the star, the waste infantium that is currently held in our storage base is going to increase the life of that star by nearly 2.5 years. My God, said Ham as his eyes opened wide. Ham then began to think for a moment. So, the infantium is perfectly safe when sitting in its own little container. Does it need to be contained by lead shielding or anything like that? No, replied Ruby. It actually can just be stored inside of a brown paper bag, and it's perfectly happy in there so long as the paper bag isn't jostling around. You could put the infantium on a shelf in a room all alone, and it would produce no radiation, trigger no detectors within that room for, say, 1,000 years, perfectly stable with seemingly no half-life. It is only when disturbed that the infantium begins to react and let loose its radiation, and its heat. The incredible heat is the biggest problem. While the radiation might hit metals nearby, infusing them with radioactivity themselves, making them fissile, the heat is what causes the most issues. Well, I must say, we haven't even started the tour yet, and already I'm very impressed with this facility, said Ham. He turned towards Bo, who was hanging out behind them. Bo, could you get down on all fours for me real quick? Why, certainly, he said, getting down on all fours into his quadrupedal mode. Ham then swung his leg over the man and rode atop the metal synth. Ruby, I believe you're carrying Marty Jones. How about we take this tour properly? Bo was happily wagging his tail back and forth, and Ruby was happy to show off the various components that made up the perpetual fusion reactor engine. Although the explanation of how perpetual energy was possible was a rather simple solution, the actual implication of that solution was anything but, and the tour had lasted several hours before they made it back to the rest of the group that was waiting for them. When they all finally piled onto the train car and began moving down to Ring 3, the archivists were interested in a lot of the writings that they were putting down, and photographs and pictures they had taken from the inside of the ship. We never could have imagined that the ship we were on was so advanced. We have so much technological regression as a result of just being colonists on this ship. We don't even know how to make machines fly, some of us. Really, Ham said. Well, that was kind of the point. You were supposed to be colonists who, well, wouldn't present much of a threat to the operation of this vessel. Some of the archivists looked back at each other. Yes, but to think that we are so not technologically advanced for where we are, it feels like that was a plan from the start. Likely was, said Ham. The Puritans seem to treat humans like cattle, so I would imagine that was always the plan. But that's for you all to deal with, not me. So, I'm mostly glad to no longer have to deal with those gravity plates, said Marty. It'll be nice to get back to centrifugal gravity, what I'm used to. Huh, Ham laughed. You think you're done with gravity plates? We're heading down to Ring 3. You know, the ring that does not turn. Oh, the small man said. I suppose the entire ring is then gravity-plated, isn't it? Oh, it's better than that, said Ham. You were on the small gravity plates up here in the center of the ship. You're about to go to the emergency large gravity plates. Energy-wise, they're way more efficient, but at their edges, the gravity is angular towards the center, and at their middle, the gravity is way too strong. Hate to break it to you, but if you thought those gravity plates were bad, these ones are going to be even worse. How much worse? Asked Marty. Well, if you were to look closely to those sewage vats that we were just looking at, you may have noticed that the water was seemingly non-level. It kind of went up and down like waves that couldn't move. That's because of the gravity plating beneath them. Down here, those waves are going to be bigger. Humps of land and water that seem to just go up and down. What's weird is as you walk up those humps of land, you're going to feel as though you're walking on a level surface, but you're not. it's the gravity plates fooling you. And their range isn't like real gravity. It's not far enough out to actually keep things held down, so it wouldn't surprise me if the tops of trees got a little crazy down there. As the train began to enter Ring 3, it was exactly as Ham had said. The only push that allowed objects to reach the gravity plates was the gentle push from the sun rods that were mounted above. As they reacted and forced their light and heat onto things, they gently pushed it towards the ground. Eventually things entered the field of the gravity plates and were held down, although they were held in an odd manner that caused the terrain to be bumpy and not smooth. Water seemed to flow up as it formed into small streams around. Every sign that there was once a thriving civilization on this ring had all but been erased, replaced by thick, ridiculous jungle, with tree canopies that were extended far beyond what the trees themselves could hold up, growing and thriving in the zero-gravity environment. Everywhere Ham could see small amounts of motion, things darting back and forth between branches and treetops. "Well, this is gonna be fun," Ham said, as the train continued to descend. He looked around and could see large numbers of synths beginning to descend into the zero-gravity environment with jetpacks upon their shoulders. "Don't worry, Ham. Because there's no people to get on our way, we can do most of the work ourselves. There's just a few things that you, personally, might need to see and authenticate." "Got it," he said, as he sat down in the train car. He pulled out his small personal device and began looking through things immediately. "Looks like you've already completed some of the jobs and I can okay them from here." He then started using his fingerprint to okay some of the work. Much of the work required the cutting of roots and limbs, the moving of large amounts of dirt and a couple of stone rocks here and there, and occasionally the rubble of buildings that had long since fallen down and been covered up below. "I feel like underground maintenance shafts would have been very crucial and important in the design of the Pangea," Ham said as he placed his fingerprint upon the tablet once more. "But I suppose that would have been a vulnerability. If passengers had managed to get in there, oh man, I can only imagine how bad things could have gotten." Marty Jones, as well as one of the Navy officers, looked over at Ham. "You're talking about us like we're children or animals." "Well, I mean, that's how people are when they're at Mass. Can't help it." The train came to a stop when there was a branch on the line. "Looks like you guys haven't been able to keep the lines entirely clear." "Of course we haven't," said one of the synths. "Look at how much there is to clear. There's trees everywhere. This whole place is exploded with natural growth from everything." Pangea, who was visiting one of the habitation rings for the first time herself, picked up the tree and threw it off the tracks. As Vicky looked excited outside the railcar. "This place is amazing. I've never seen something so alive and natural like this before." "Of course you haven't," said Ham. "You were raised inside of a church that was centrally located inside of a small garden within a crowded, congested city environment. I doubt any of you have seen something like this. Hell, even I haven't. Earth isn't exactly known for having lush green forests anymore." When they made their way to a problem that couldn't easily be fixed by the synths, Ham was forced to leave the train for a moment. "Here we go. Something's gonna go wrong, I just know it is," he said as he crossed over the tracks and walked over to the synths, who were currently jumping in and out of a hole. "All right," Ham said. "What sort of problem do we have here?" "It's one of the big clamps that connect the various city tiles together. This one's reading a failure and it won't even try to move the clamp, not to mention it's seized up with corrosion." Ham took a look at the tile. "Yep," he said, while staring at his tablet. "According to this, the computer's not even trying to pull it back. Pangea, can you override that and force it to try to move the clamp?" Pangea tried, but suddenly reported back to Ham that she couldn't. "Nope, I'm getting an error code. Apparently it just can't transmute the message." "Interesting," said Ham. "I wonder if it can move, and the corrosion is just on it, and we just have to tell the software to move it back. Or Maybe the software is telling us it can't move because it's so corroded. I'm not certain what to do here, but it feels like we're going to waste a lot of time on something that could probably be solved easily. Vicky had left the train. With her wings, she could easily fly up to the branches above. As soon as she left the gravity fields, she found herself in zero gravity, able to float freely, her wings only used to bump her back and forth using the air pressure. "I can't believe I've been in space my entire life," she said, "and never experienced zero gravity." Her young newborn daughter was clinging onto her tight, frightened by the lack of gravity. Now, it's okay," she said to her. The first throne wasn't too thrilled about leaving the ground, so he stayed down below, where things made more sense to him. The second throne easily jumped up and left the gravity field, able to grab onto the trees so that she could better maneuver herself for watching over their goddess. "Look at that," Vicky said, as she pointed to something darting amongst the trees. She watched as whatever it was darted back and forth from branch to branch. "Is that a bird?" she asked. What was darting back and forth from tree to tree was not in fact a bird, although it was descended from a bird-like species. A strange species of avian then revealed itself from the branches, curious about who was meddling around in the forest. It looked at them, its body strange and circular like a shuttlecock. It had not wings, but a skirt of feathers, along with 4 beak-like appendages at the front of its face, which opened up. 3 eyes decorated its body, and as it pulsed its skirt, it moved around in zero gravity. "Ham, you have got to see this," Vicky said. The shuttlecock then jumped down to where gravity was prevalent, and jumped through the stick litter upon the ground. After picking up a few insects, it easily jumped high into the sky again, joining Vicky up in the zero gravity. "Ham, you have got to see how these birds have evolved. It's amazing," she said. Ham put down his small personal device for a moment. "They're going to be cleaning that corrosion off for a while." He then looked up at the angelic creature that was flying above him. "What is it that you got up there?" She was now reaching out her finger, and the small shuttlecock-like creature had landed upon it. "Look at how these birds have evolved." "I wouldn't touch them," Ham said. "Those creatures apparently are infected with some kind of forced compatibility sequence virus thing. It's how everything around here works, apparently. That's what Pangea told me herself." Pangea shook her head up and down. "Yes, but it doesn't spread from individual creature to individual creature. You have to be injected with the virus, otherwise you get over it rather quickly. And the virus only works when you're breeding." "Yeah, I get that," Ham said, "but that right there is a baby factory, so probably not a good idea to let her get infected." The second throne agreed, and suggested that her holy deity should go ahead and allow the bird to fly off on its own. "You know, it's funny," Ham said. "I was told there was going to be people on this ring, and yet, as I look around, I see only forest. What's their population look like?" Pangea, who was peering down through the trees, moved her hand to gesture, very low. From my understanding, the Fae don't really have a very high population, and they like a lot of space away from each other, so even if we do meet one, we'll probably only meet one, she said, raising a finger. Bo, who was now walking on all fours, jumped back and forth through the bushes, dirt, and gravel that was underneath his feet. "I must say I enjoy the more natural environment. When we land on the planet below, Mr. Ham, would you tolerate the occasional trip to the mainland? I realize we'll be living on a floating paradise, but it might be fun to venture through the forests every now and then." "Only if we're far away from other human civilization," Ham said. "My face will probably be recognizable at that point, and I'd rather not deal with any political fallout of everything I'm doing here." Everyone was enjoying themselves. Many of the synths all around the ring were hard at work, digging or repairing pieces of the ship that needed repaired. The archivists were trying to take note of everything they saw around them. There was too much fauna, too much flora, too much to record. Many of them had already filled up their journals and were now resorting to electronic methods of recording. Even the naval officers who had joined Ham were perfectly content to sit aboard the top of the train and enjoy a drink while they looked on at the horizon. "I can't believe something like this was on the ship," one of the officers said to each other. "Yeah, it's pretty nice looking. I wish we'd had access to it from the start. I wonder why there was a travel ban." Just then, he heard rustling in the bushes far away. "The hell is that? What the hell is that thing?" he said. A strange humanoid creature emerged from the bushes. The Navy officers immediately pointed their guns at it. "What the hell is that thing?" they said. When Ham looked over, he saw an oafish ape-like creature. "Well, they never stored apes as animals on this ship, so I would imagine that's one of the Fae, perhaps." "Hello?" he asked the creature. It stood there, still picking at the ground, trying to find something. It wore no clothing, seemed to have a second rib cage over its own, and no discernible neck to speak of, its head fused with its torso. Its oafish-like appearance caused it to look larger than it actually was. "Hey there, big guy. You want to answer me? Hello?" Ham said as he tried to wave towards the creature. The strange creature looked up, only one of its eyes looking at Ham, the other darting into a random direction. Slowly it parted its lips apart and opened two separate sets of teeth. Then it uttered a single phrase, a phrase that Ham didn't well understand. "Bichimignon!" "What?" Ham said, as he moved slightly closer to the creature. "Bichimignon!" The creature shouted again. What the hell is this thing saying? With all eyes on the creature, suddenly, it turned hostile, almost with no warning. It ran forward towards Ham with its arms outstretched, screaming the phrase again, "Bichimignon! Bichimignon!" It grabbed onto Ham's face before anyone could stop it. Ham was now intimate with the fact that the creature, instead of fingers, had 5 thumbs on its hands. Thumbs that it obviously used to scratch its own body, as a particularly foul-smelling digit was now firmly lodged inside of Ham's mouth, as the creature was grabbing onto his skull with the rest of its hand, shaking him back and forth. "Bichimignon! Bichimignon!" Ham couldn't speak, as one of the gargantuan thumbs was now clogging his mouth. But, with the neural implant inside of his brain, Pangea could clearly understand what he was saying. The mix of panicked emotions thoroughly rushing through Ham's mind could be articulated as such. For the love of all things holy, it uses its hand to scratch its own ass. I can tell because there's now shit in my mouth. For the love of God, someone kill this thing. For all that is sacred, please someone shoot this thing in the head. Ham was clearly thinking. He had a gun on his hip, but was powerless to actually grab it and shoot at the creature. Bo wanted to run up and pull Ham away from the creature, but it was holding on to his face so tightly that Bo was fearful that he would injure Ham if he tried to pull him away. He struck the creature's head as hard as he could with his fist, with robotic force, and yet, the creature barely even fell, just stumbled a bit. It continued to scream as it shook Ham back and forth. "Bichimignon! Bichimignon!" it wailed loudly. As though coming down from the sky, the first throne drew its sword and came down, slicing the creature's hand off. "This zero gravity suits me well," the first throne said, as he then kicked the creature into the bushes. Ham immediately pulled the severed hand out of his mouth and proceeded to vomit on the ground. "This is the second time on this little adventure I've puked," he said, as he picked himself up and began to walk back towards the train. Bo immediately got between him and the creature. The creature rose to its feet once more, completely undissuaded by its missing limb. "Bichimignon!" it shouted once more. This time, however, they could hear it being replied to. "Bichimignon!" they could hear off in the distance. More of the creatures were now approaching, surrounding the train from all sides, as they began to arise from the bushes. "I think you should probably get back on the train," Pangaea said, as she immediately grabbed Vicky and the second throne and began to lower them towards the train. "Maybe you should just hide inside the railcar until I can somehow sort this out." The synths and the archivists got into a defensive position around the railcar. The Navy officers sat on top of the railcar with their guns pointed at the creatures. "What the hell do they want?" asked the Navy officers. "I don't know," replied Pangaea. "They've never been hostile to any of the synths before. We've seen these exact creatures many times that we've come down here. I don't think they're the Fae, though. I think they're just monsters," she said as she kicked one of them away. The second it entered zero gravity, it began flailing its arms back and forth. "Bichimigno! Bichimigno!" it said as it began to float away. The creatures then began to charge the railcar. Despite the fact that Pangaea was doing her best to whip around her tail and keep them at bay, some of them broke through and managed to grab onto the shields of some of the Archivist Knights. "I don't want to kill the things," Pangaea said, "but they're not really giving us much of a choice." As one of them put its nasty hand onto the glass where Ham was, Ham clearly cleared his throat. "Yeah, I've vomited too many times and I'm done with this," he said as he pulled out the double-barrel 1911 that he had gotten from Grand Admiral Phillips. He pointed the gun directly at the creature's forehead and pulled the trigger. Despite the fact that now the top of its head was missing, it was still screaming as it did. "Bichimigno!" Undeterred by its wound, it continued to bash the side of the train with its arms. Ham continued to fire, this time striking several of its vital organs in its chest, finally dropping it to the ground. "Damn, these things are tough," he said. At the sound of the captain opening fire with a pistol, the Navy officers figured it was time that they fire their rifles in return. They proceeded to kill off as many of the creatures as they could. Pangaea picked them up and hurled them through the air as far away as she could muster. Bo was forced to combat them hand to hand. They were incredibly strong, but not so strong as they could take on a well-muscular, defined synth. He began to rip them apart piece by piece as he threw them into the bushes. Still, though, the creatures came. Those that were injured and laid upon the ground didn't seem that bothered by their injuries. They still shouted the same phrase over and over. "Bichimigno!" they shouted. Some kind of reinforcement call, perhaps, Ham figured, as more of them began to arrive from the bushes. The second and first throne were focused solely on keeping the creatures away from the railroad car that Vicky, their holy deity, was inside of. The first throne was beheading them, if you could call it beheading. Of course, their arms were still attached to the top of their head, and their torso now lay down upon the ground. The second throne was striking them as hard as she possibly could with her legs, causing them to turn into a kind of meat paste upon the ground. "Oh God," said Ham, "don't tell me that these things are the Fae. If these things are the Fae, as far as I'm concerned, this entire ring can just drift off into space," he said, as one of the creatures threw its bloodied body against the side of the railcar. As even more of the creatures began to emerge from the woods and approach the railroad car, Ham could hear a strange mechanical humming from the air. "The hell is that?" he said as he looked out the window. He could see a large number of small objects whizzing fast overhead. They immediately found their targets, the back of the heads of each no-neck. One by one, the fast-moving mechanical bumblebee-like objects immediately burrowed deep into the back of the heads of the strange creatures. Then, all of them, with a sickening pop, detonated, dropping every single monster down to the ground all at once. "What the hell was that?" Ham said as he put his gun away. "Are there any left?" he said as he cautiously moved his face towards the window. The Navy officers looked all around at the sea of the dead around them. "I think it's clear, sir." "Yep," agreed the other Navy officer. "All clear." We're going to definitely want to record this for the report." "Yeah, definitely," he said. "What the hell took all these creatures out?" one of the officers asked himself. Ham slowly lowered himself off the train car as Bo immediately walked up to check on his well-being and gave a small thumbs up to Pangaea, who also looked quite worried. A voice then called out from up above. "Hello, hello!" The friendly voice called out. Up here, it repeated. Ham looked up to see a rather strange sight. A gargantuan building with legs was now descending down through the trees upon them. "Okay, I'm done. What the hell is this?" Ham said. A seemingly friendly-looking six-eyed woman was staring at them back from the edge of the balcony of this building that was descending down upon them. Its gigantic bird-like legs landed upon the ground, and it lowered the building until Ham could see who was sitting upon its porch. Ham found himself in a feeling of bewilderment as he looked upon who was standing on the porch. He couldn't help but wonder if he had somehow slipped into the strange universe of a fantasy novel. A drider, a half-human, half-spider hybrid, was now standing upon the porch, waving her hand at him. "Why, hello there," she said. "I bet you all are not from around here. I'm just judging based on your appearance, of course." Ham, as well as the archivists, began to cautiously approach the woman. "You're not some monster here to attack us, are you?" Ham asked. No, I'm friendly," she promised. She picked up a strange box, made of durable canvas and wood, and then closed the lid on it. "Don't worry," she said, putting the strange box back onto her back. "I'm not going to shoot any of you. I'm friendly." "That was you," Ham said. "Absolutely." "You like it? It's my own brew of kind of weapon. They're small, auto-tracking explosives that fly through the air and burrow into the back of the no-neck's head. They then find the spot where the brain actually attaches to the spine and detonate. It's the most humane way of killing them." "No-neck," Ham repeated. "Is that what they're called?" "Oh yes," the drider confirmed. "Those creatures are called no-necks. They're not people, don't worry about killing them. They're just animals that wander around here and will kill anything they see, for seemingly no reason, unfortunately." "I understand," Ham said. Ham then got the confidence to go ahead and join the woman on the porch. "So, you're one of the residents of this place. You're one of the Fae, am I right?" "Absolutely," she said as she slowly bowed herself. "And you're the captain of the ship, I recognize you. We saw your face in the sky, although it was a bit obscured. Things down here on Ring 3 don't quite work properly." "Oh yeah, sorry about that," said Ham. "As soon as we get everything fixed and I can certify that this place is structurally sound, I'm actually going to have the ship start rotating, and centrifugal gravity will be restored to this ring, if that's okay with you all. There might be a couple trees fall down as a result, if not all of them." "Oh, don't worry about that, we're good at surviving," said the strange drider creature. "Come on inside. I'd love for you all to meet my business partner, and we would like to get to know you a little bit better," she said as she winked one of her 6 eyes at Ham. "Oh god, oh no. No, please don't. I can't handle any more weird hijinks. I've had enough of this ship. I just want to get down to the planet below." "Whatever's wrong with us," she said. "I take it you're not enthusiastic about meeting a giant spider lady?" "Oh no, I've just had enough puking, enough poop, enough nasty, disgusting bastards who prey upon children. I just want some normal people. It's okay that you're half spider, just promise me you're not going to do anything crazy." She then immediately raised one of her clawed hands. "I promise we're just tailors. We just want to talk to you about potential business opportunities and advantages we can get from knowing the captain of the ship, and of course we want to know, are we welcome? On the planet, that is?" "Why wouldn't you be welcome?" Ham asked. "Well, you know, we're monsters." "No." Ham then pointed at some of the bodies laying upon the ground. "Those things are monsters. You are people. Monsters are made of actions, not body parts." The drider immediately smiled. "Oh, I like you." Those that could fit inside began to walk into the tailor shop. Luckily, the doors were wide enough to accommodate the drider, and that meant they were also wide enough to fit larger creatures like Bo and some of the thrones. Pangaea was forced to sit outside, as she was nearly the size of the building itself. The Drider, sitting upon a strange chair, obviously made for her body, then introduced herself. I am Lysandra, and this is my partner, Volet, she said, pointing to the counter. Of course, no one was there. Where exactly is your partner? Ham asked. Lysandra then banged her foot against the ground. Volet, get up here. We have customers. Just then, a rather strange bird-looking individual came up from the bottom of the floor, a trapdoor opening allowing him to now stand before the counter. Why, hello there. What can I get for you? He said. Volet, Lysandra scolded him. This is the captain of the ship. Recognize him from the sky? Volet then squinted his eyes and put on a pair of spectacles. Oh my goodness, it is, he said. You're the actual captain. You are the captain of Pangaea. Looking through the window, waved a metal hand. Out there's Pangaea herself, if you'd like to say hello to her, too. Volet then looked out the window and waved. Oh my goodness. To what do we owe this pleasure? I'm just fixing the ship, Ham clarified, and then those no-neck things attacked us, and your friend here, Lysandra, seemed to save our lives, so I'm quite grateful. Oh, that's why she told me to land, Volet said. I was wondering why. The bird creature kept on scratching the top of his head, nervous as though he didn't want to bring something up. What's the matter? You look like you have something to say. Cat got your tongue? Ham asked. Well, you're seeing us for the first time, right, Mr. Ham, is it, you said? Yes, indeed. My name is Ham, and I am certainly seeing the Fae for the first time. Had one of those no-neck things stuck his thumb into my mouth. It was gross, Ham said. Those are not the Fae, Volet pointed his finger. Those are just monsters. We assure you those are not the Fae. They don't even come from the same place that the Fae come from. I assure you that was not us. All right, well, you don't have to convince me of that. I believe you. Yes, well, we imagined this meeting for a long time, all of us, on this ring. So, what do you think of us? What do you mean, what do I think? Ham asked for clarification. Well, do you think we're worthy of going down to the planet below, or are we just monsters that need to stay out of humans' ways? Ham thought about it for a second. I don't know, and I don't care. If you're on the ship, you're going to be on the planet. Simple as that. It's not my business to care about the quality of people I put down on that world. It's only my business to care about whether or not you actually get on the world. So as far as I'm concerned, whether you're a spider or I have no idea what kind of bird you are, you're perfectly suitable to go down to the planet below. None of you are going to stay in space, not one single person. Not a single murderer, not a single monster. Both the spider and the bird person took a deep sigh of relief. Oh, thank God, they said. We have been having a bit of existential dread ever since we saw you in the sky, uncertain of how you were going to treat us when you actually saw us face to face. Volet then picked up a handkerchief and seemed to wipe his mouth for a second. Not to mention, I wasn't expecting to actually meet you. I thought you were just going to announce, all right, all you freaks to the camps. Ham laughed for a moment. No, it's fine. So, I guess, tell me about yourselves. Tell me, what is this place and how does your culture work? I might as well listen while I'm waiting for repairs nearby. Oh, certainly, I would love to, but I'm not really knowledgeable about history or how our entire culture works. I'm just a tailor. Lysandra immediately shook her hand. Trust me, you're best to be the one to talk about it. I don't know shit. I never paid attention very much, even in my private schooling. the arachnid promised. She then reached back and began pulling thread out of her body, weaving it into something. I'm better off at just working on our clothes, if you don't mind. Volet then sank down into the trap door that was below the back of the counter. He then emerged from another trap door, somewhat nearby, and rested upon a cushioned area that seemed to be for seating guests. Please, have a seat and I'll tell you about it. He then looked closer at Vicky, who seemed to have angel wings sticking from her back. Aren't you one of us as well? Oh, no, Vicky said, looking at her 4 angel wings. I could understand the misunderstanding. I'm actually an angel. I'm from Ring 2. Volet seemed to raise his eyebrows. I am the immortal holy deity of the archivists. I make infinite babies. She then held up Olivia, her child, from her breast. And this is my daughter, Olivia. She's also an angel. The spider and the bird both looked back and forth at each other with raised eyebrows. Ham then confirmed their statement. Oh no, she's actually something weird. She can see the future and stuff. That is legitimately a thing. But again, I don't deal with things, so just move on and skip to the part where you tell me about yourselves and your whole everything that is here so I can at least have a grasp of it. Well, sir, the bird clarified. Mr. Captain Ham. You don't have to be so formal, just call me Ham. Yes, sir. We are the Fae, that is, fast-adapting evolutionists. We started as people living down on Ring 4, and when Ring 3 shut down, everyone was evacuated. We either went to Ring 4 or to the upper rings. Those of us who remained on Ring 4 when it started increasing its gravity, and everyone was forced to just work tirelessly to make food for the upper rings that didn't seem too eager to actually accept it or even be thankful for the work we were doing. We quickly realized that things weren't working out for us. And then when those elves started showing up, things got a little weird, especially for us as humans who couldn't keep up with the labor, and the heavy gravity took a really hard toll on our bodies. So, we ventured to try and seek freedom rather than just constant enslavement and labor. We came to the abandoned ring, Ring 3, and tried to survive here. As you can imagine, the constant exposure to artificial gravity plates and the lack of natural gravity came with all kinds of health side effects, and we sought ways of trying to cure ourselves. Interesting, said Ham. I'm going to guess that those cures involved genetically modifying your children. You guessed it, the man replied. At first, these genetic modifications didn't have too many side effects, but over time, they started to accumulate. We called ourselves the Fae back when we all looked like literal fairies. An antenna here, a small wing here. Sometimes we had different colored eyes or hair, nothing too big. We didn't really have time to properly sort out the DNA alterations we were making. A lot of people were just focused on trying to fix potential problems like heart attacks, blood clots, suddenly dying in your sleep for some reason because your bones had turned to chalk and then a splinter of it somehow ended up in your bloodstream. We were facing some real serious issues. I would imagine, Ham said. And these issues weren't as bad as going down to Ring 4? We weren't going back, he replied. Nothing could get us to go back and enter that kind of servitude again. I understand. Give me liberty or give me death. But please, go on. Well, as some of us started being born with feathers and scales and all kinds of weird adaptations because we were pulling some of our genetic codes for modification from animals, eventually some of us became sterile. We called these sterile individuals mules. We didn't treat them any differently. Many of them were just as intelligent and wonderful as the rest of us, but they had no capacity for continuing to breed, and this was a big problem. Even the ones that could breed couldn't find anyone that they could breed with. too many incompatible genetic sequences. We were too far from humanity. And, because of that, we were in serious risk of dying off. "I've heard of this," replied Ham. "It was part of the briefing. You guys are willfully infected with some kind of retrovirus that allows you to breed, right?" "Exactly," Volet said. He pulled out a small bottle of pills from his pocket. "I actually carry some with me right here. I don't really know why I carry them. I don't really have plans of having children soon, but I have a bottle just in case the opportunity should arise. I don't want to be without them. Plus, they're kind of pricey." "I see. So, how do those pills work?" "Well, from my understanding, I take a pill, wait a few hours, and then once I'm infected, I can then breed with anyone I want so long as they're female, and our genetic codes will splice together. She also has to take a pill, and then bing bang boom, baby is made." "All right. And the baby is guaranteed to be viable?" "Absolutely. And that's how our society has pretty much functioned ever since." "Very interesting," Ham said. "So, do you guys also have a mayor and a sheriff, the whole political system that we established on the ship?" Lysandra shook her head back and forth. "Oh no, we got rid of all that nonsense. We're very strict anarcho-libertarians." "Anarcho-libertarians? How does that work?" "Well, we're anarchists in the fact that we don't trust any sort of established government. And we're libertarians in the fact that we don't trust any sort of established government." Heh, she laughed. "But in all seriousness, we believe that the rules of an individual business or household overcome any sort of government law. And if you don't like the rules of someone's house or someone's business, you should leave. Every man's home is his own castle, and every man is king of that castle. So, basically, you just have to respect a person's household and personal business, and try not to mess around too much. We have a very firm fuck around and find out culture." "I can respect that," said Ham. Lysandra then scratched the side of her head slightly and clarified something to Ham. "Just to be clear, we Fae don't exactly trust you because you're, the ship's captain. You have the capacity to be a bit of a tyrant, so I should warn you that I haven't told you everything. Ignorance of the law is actually an excuse in our society. So if you don't know the rules, you'll be forgiven slightly in breaking them. And we don't exactly want outsiders to know the rules, because that means you could subvert them." "Oh, I definitely respect that," said Ham. "And don't worry, I have no intention of maintaining my authority. The second we're on the ground below, I'm just an ordinary guy." Both of them smiled as they looked at each other. "Oh yeah, we definitely like this guy." "I must say, the Fae seem like a very interesting and compelling people. So, explain to me, you're a tailor shop, right? Do you tailor clothing for all manner of variety of species?" "Absolutely," Violent said. "It's our specialty to custom make all sorts of outfits. The Fae don't do mass production, because everything's got to be custom made to our rather obscure physical appearance," he said, gesturing to one of his wings. "Because of that, everything's got to be handmade, so personally owned shops like this thrive. We make all kinds of custom outfits." Vicky then perked up, looking at him more intimately. "Let me guess. You want a nice-fitting dress that works out better with your wings." One of the small thrones, the first throne, looked up as though he had hurt feelings. "You do not like your dress, madam?" "Oh, I like it just fine, but it sounds like these guys are experts. Do you mind if I look around a little bit?" "Of course. All of our show pieces are designed for the human body shape, but please be advised we can modify them to fit absolutely anyone. I guarantee it. I could make a scarf for a snake. I know, because I have." The Spider-Woman jumped from her seat and began taking Vicky's measurements. You guys custom make as much as you can. You don't believe in mass production. You believe in owning small personal shops. And you're anarcho-libertarians. I'm starting to like you guys. We're also technologically advanced, clarified Lysandra. You'll find some very interesting technology amongst the Fae, if you're willing to pay attention closely, she said as she pulled out a small piece of paper. When she gave the small piece of paper a small rip, a pair of scissors popped out from it that she began using to cut some thread. "The hell was that?" said Ham. "We're firm believers that knowledge is power, so if you have knowledge, you have power. We don't really go for things like money or trying to control other people. We go for self-sufficiency and being able to produce the technology reliably yourself, so we have some of the best technology around." "That is impressive. Is that what allows your house to walk?" Ham asked. The Birdman then raised an eyebrow. "No, that's me." Ham looked back at Violent. "So, it's like some kind of creature you've tamed, or what?" "No," he said with a blush. My tailor shop sits on my hips. Those are my legs." Ham looked rather confused as he began to walk over to the window and look outside. The gigantic legs that are currently carrying the building are part of your body." "Yeah, anytime I eat, let's just say it goes straight to my hips." "Yeah, I would say so," said Ham. He looked back at the man, who was about the size of him, but whose torso was extending down into a trapdoor below. "Holy moly, those are your legs, and this is the top of your body." "Yes," he said, scratching his beak. "I'm aware of the rather odd change in size. That's why I wear my tailor shop over the top of my body, so I have a place to stay and be comfortable." "My goodness," he asked. "Where do you buy shoes?" "I don't, jackass." Ham laughed for a second and then cleared his throat. "So, those no-neck things that attacked us, where exactly are they from? Are they also like you in some way?" The Spider-Woman and the bird looked at each other for a moment. "No. They're from before a time in which we had the universal compatibility sequence. They are actually mules, from when we were just wildly trying to genetically modify ourselves. And they're the result of mules gone in a very wrong direction. There's a lot of them down there for being sterile. Isn't that what you said the mules were?" "Oh, they're certainly sterile," the two said. The Spider-Woman then tapped her fingers. "Unfortunately, they are capable of self-cloning. An organ inside their body, called the appendix, grows a clone of themselves and then they pass it out their other end. The clone then gets up and has much the same behavior as the adult before it. They are essentially mentally defective humans with severe genetic mutation, but since they act like animals, and there's no way to possibly tame or communicate with them, you have to treat them like animals." "Are you telling me that we were attacked by a bunch of..." "Yes, I'm afraid so. You were attacked and forced to defend yourself by and from a bunch of mentally deficient, mutated humans. They're actually not that far off from humanity, but in Fae territory, that's what we call Ring 3 here, we firmly believe that if something acts like an animal, you treat it like an animal. If something acts like a person, you treat it like a person. After all, take a look at us. There's not really any way to tell who's who and what's what until they actually start talking and moving around. I'm not enthusiastic about releasing hundreds of what are essentially heavily mutated and mentally deficient humans into the wilds of the New World, but I suppose that's the cost of meddling with genetic modification equipment." "It's not all bad," said the Spider-Woman. "Now that we have the tree and the universal compatibility sequence, It's very rare that any children are born with serious life-threatening deficiencies. Almost unheard of. Ham raised an eyebrow. The tree? The tree? Ham asked. What exactly is the tree? Bo quite happily picked up Ham's personal device and handed it to him. I believe they're talking about this particular tree. Ham looked at the device and showed it to the Fae in front of him. The Spider-Woman shook her head up and down and confirmed, yes, that is certainly the tree we're talking about. Some call it the Blightwood tree. Volant took over speaking for Lysandra. The bird-like creature tapped its fingers on the table. Yes, that tree is called the Blightwood tree. It is the remnants of the laboratory that made the forced compatibility sequence. In fact, we harvest the forced compatibility sequence from its branches. It's not exactly a plant, nor is it an animal. We're not entirely certain what it is, but it's the remnants of the laboratory. Some kind of mishap or mistake resulted in its creation. It is a hostile living creature, so you gotta be careful when approaching it. A tree is hostile? Asked Ham. I would like you to explain that further. How is a tree hostile? Well, if you get too close to it and it doesn't like you, it'll try striking you with its branches, and seeing as some of the branches are about the same width wide as a bus is long, that would hurt a lot. It also has a large number of various budding plant life, along with budding animal life that could easily devour you whole, drag you away, or slurp you into one of its many collection caves. Ham blinked multiple times. I didn't like the phrasing collection caves. What is those? The bird-like man seemed to have a difficult time answering. He scratched at his face and poked at his beak, as if not knowing how to say the resulting sentence to answer Ham's questions. Lysandra took over for him. It extracts semen and eggs from unwilling hosts. It'll drag you off and extract your genetic materials to then make offspring. The offspring, of course, are the result of the forced compatibility sequence, so there's no way of knowing what will come out of that tree. And there's no way of knowing what sort of partner it will use to make that offspring, whether it be a person like us or even an animal. That's why all us Fae look so, well, random, because we are. That tree shoots us off more than we do. Wait, so you guys have a tree that makes more of you? Asked Ham. Yes, Volant explained. I actually came from that tree. I didn't know any better when I was a young infant, and the tree didn't seem too hostile towards me, until eventually I wandered out and was grabbed by more Fae like myself, bird kind of people. They raised me as best they could, and then I became the man you see before you today. If I walk up to the tree now, its only interest would be to drag me off or to try to defend itself from me, so I have no kin to speak of. I don't even know what to say to that, said Ham. What about you, Lysandra? The Spider-Woman tapped her fingers against her thorax. Well, I'm not from that tree directly, but I imagine some of my ancestors are. I come from another Drider just like myself. The Driders are almost a functional species, but the Fae have not yet rejected us. Rejected you? Asked Ham. If you become a functional species and start governing amongst yourselves, the Fae as a collective will reject you, but that's more of our personal business and not something you need to concern yourself with. Ham shook his head, understanding that the Fae had a strict policy about people knowing their inner workings. Got it, said Ham. Wow, you have an entire Genesis tree that makes more of yourself. Any reason it's called the Blightwood tree? Mostly just because of its Lovecraftian appearance, said Volant. It's got giant tendrils, it's got a lot of more interesting smaller features like flowers that look suspiciously like something that wished to connect and engage with you, if you know what I'm saying. Ah, they're flowers that try to give you a BJ, huh? That's pretty nasty. Yes, indeed, as well as several male genitalia from place to place. Pretty much the entire tree is designed to replicate itself off of you, but no copies of the tree have ever been duplicated. Just the random odd creature or person. Creature? Asked Ham. It doesn't only make people? No, Volant replied. That thing makes monsters too. There's no way of knowing what could come out of it. Why, I myself had to step on a Tyrannosaurus Rex once. Ham's eyebrows lifted nearly off of his face. Excuse me? It was biting at my leg, so I stepped on it, said Volant. My legs are down there and unshielded. No, that's not the... You know what? Not my problem, said Ham. We're going to just put a pin in that and not circle back to it. Ham continued to clear his throat and get back onto the topic at hand. At any rate, the only thing the Fae need to know is that you're people just like everyone else, and just like everyone else is on this ship, I'm going to make sure you get down to the planet below, so you're going to have no problems from me, and hopefully I'll have no problems from you. In fact, I might want to do an announcement on the entire ring before I start making the whole thing rotate around, and the gravity start crushing down a bit. The two Fae looked at each other. What sort of problems do you think that'll cause? I bet a whole bunch of trees are going to collapse. A lot of them are growing their tops in zero gravity. Ham took a look outside. Yeah, without the gravity. I suppose the plant life certainly has exploded, especially up towards the sun rods. I suppose the only thing that's pushing everything down to the ground is the gentle nudge of the light itself coming from the sun rods, and the occasional vapor spray from when there's weather events. But nothing else can be done. I suppose it just has to happen because we need the spinning centrifugal force in order for the landing gear to engage properly. Bo's display got a small update from Pangea outside. He then tapped Ham on the shoulder and pointed at his personal device once more. That's not the only thing we'll need if we're going to land this ring properly. Ham took a look at the personal device. Oh, crap. We were just talking about that Blightwood tree. The two Fae were intrigued. The Blightwood tree is a bit of a important thing to us Fae. Some of us like it, some of us don't. What's the concern about the Blightwood tree? Ham was taking a look at the tablet and tapping his finger against it. Well, as you can see on my little personal device here, it's giving me a little display as to what the root system looks like on that big Blightwood tree. And unfortunately, it's spanning all the tiles around it. It's so massive that it's actually forcibly connecting the various tiles. If we want all the tiles to land properly, including the one the Blightwood tree is currently sitting on, we're going to have to cut its roots back a bit. Do you think the tree will hold still and put up with that? The two Fae started to laugh. No, there's no way in hell you're going to get it to cooperate with that. Of course, said Ham. Volant began to move the cabin back and forth a little bit as he changed direction he was facing. If you want, I can fly us all the way over to the Blightwood tree. You can, asked Ham, but your wings are on your arms and they're very small. Obviously, I made it so that my house can fly. I don't walk it everywhere. Oh, said Ham. Makes sense to me. Yeah, I suppose we can finish up the job here, and we'll tell the train to meet us over there. Is there going to be any problem with me approaching that kind of important structure? Oh yeah, said Volant. The second any of the Fae realize you're nearby the Blightwood tree and who you are, I guarantee every single one of us is going to show up, if nothing else to witness whatever's going to happen, or even to come to the Blightwood tree's defense if you decide to go cutting it down or anything crazy like that. It's probably going to be a whole issue. I see, said Ham. Well, I can promise you that I'm not going to destroy the tree entirely. We just need to cut back its roots a bit. Ham looked at the tablet once more. Honestly, the tree will probably be fine. This is a very minor bit of trimming. We just need to make certain that the various tiles can separate properly when it's time to land. The second throne requested that Volant stay by the rail side until they made it to the Blightwood tree. That way the bulk of the Archivist's forces could continue to be nearby to protect their holy deity, something he happily agreed to. The second and first throne stayed inside the cabin with their holy deity, while she was sitting excitedly waiting for her dress to be made. Once it was properly fitted to her body, she was amazed by their craftsmanship. At long last, someone gets it that I have freaking wings. The first throne couldn't help but feel a bit stabbed. "Milady, I sewed some of your first dresses and you said you loved them." "Oh, I did, but you just can't beat someone who actually understands how my wings move." He scoffed. "I put a lot of work into those dresses." The two members of the Navy, who had been reporting nearly everything back to the Grand Admiral via their radio device, had managed to make their way up onto Valet's platform and walk into his tailor shop. Immediately, they were the sole center of attention, as their uniforms were something Valet was very interested in, along with Lysandra. They were a bit jumpy seeing the creatures, but overall, they managed to calm themselves down and allow themselves to be inspected for their uniforms. "While we're heading to this tree thing," said Ham, "is there going to be a problem between your two little groups?" he said, pointing to the Fae and the Navy officers. "Why ever would there be a problem?" asked one of the Navy. "Well, these guys are kind of monsters. Look at that one. It's half spider, and this guy's a giant birdhouse thing. That's not a problem?" Both the Navy officers looked at each other. "We are fighting a bitter war with people who actually give a shit about the color of your skin and where you're from on Earth. Why the hell would we care about something as trivial as that when we're fighting against those kind of assholes?" Ham shook his head up and down. "Well, I guess that's fair enough. Go Navy," he said as he pumped his fist in the air. The Navy officers laughed. "We're not like the missionary bastards. We do not judge people by what they look like. We judge them based upon what's in here," they said, tapping on their chests. Lysandra broke the silence. "My heart is actually in my ass, and my chest part is mostly just for breathing, and it's got a huge esophagus. Is that going to be a problem?" The men began to laugh. "No, that's not a problem at all." Marty Jones, the dwarf on the back of Ruby, the synth, had remained mostly silent during the conversation. He was furiously taking notes and had gone through several pens. But at the talk of acceptance, he had to get a word in edgewise. "As long as you don't call us lesser people," he said with air quotes, "I'm perfectly happy." They all laughed. "I can't believe that the missionaries thought that was an acceptable thing to label you as." "Yes, well, overbearing authoritarian groups like the missionaries are all throughout history. If you pick up a history book, you'll always find some group of people deciding to get offended on your behalf and deciding for you what you should be called. They're everywhere, and it's not really worth too much brainpower thinking about it." When they made their way to the Blightwood tree, Ham looked out the window to take a glance at the eldritch timber. "My God," he said, as he looked at its branches slowly moving about in the lack of wind that was on the ring. "It's somewhat terrifying, especially with the small hole in the giant canopy allowing light through." "Yeah, it's definitely thematic," Volt said. "But it's all for a functional purpose. See the large concrete pads we have completely surrounding the tree? That's so we can park our houses around the tree and try to collect people from it. A lot of us choose to raise adopted children rather than have our own, and if we do have our own, it's usually nice to give them a brother or sister or two. So we park our little houses around the tree and try to grab anyone walking away from it. Typically, the tree actually produces nearly full-grown adolescents. That's how I myself got picked up. I walked far enough away from the tree that people felt safe to go ahead and scoop up the little bird boy with huge legs." "I see," said Ham. There were a few mobile structures already parked around the Blightwood tree. These structures were filled with inhuman-looking figures that moved from the shadowy corners of the homes. As they peered out and took a look at who was sitting next to the Blightwood tree, They retreated back into their homes and got on radios and telephones, whispering messages to people far and wide. As Ham began to receive some of the messages via Pangaea, he understood what was happening. Well, looks like we're about to get some company. Ham's prediction was in fact correct, as it wasn't long before a thriving community was completely surrounding the Eldritch Timber. Over the next few hours, many of the synths began to descend upon the Blightwood tree, in the vain attempt at cutting back some of its roots. Despite the technological advancements of the synths and their metal-framed bodies, that was no match for a large telephone pole-like limb swatting at them at nearly 60 miles an hour. All right, Ham said. Pangaea, call off the synths. Clearly we can't just brute force this tree. I would hate to lose it. I want it to go down to the planet below, especially if it's so important to these Fae people. But if I can't cut it back, I don't know what I'll do. The synths were beginning to back off the tree, giving up on their shovels and laser weapons. Ham was now looking down at the large conglomerate Fae community. Many of them were centaur-like creatures. Some had large insect-like wings and resembled that of fairies and the stuff of folklore and legend. Ham could have swore he saw several minotaurs and perhaps even a werewolf or two walking about. I've never seen such colorful and imaginative creatures in real life, Ham remarked. I can't even begin to imagine what society is going to look like, considering all the various different versions of new life and species that's going to be living and coexisting on the planet below. That'll certainly be interesting, to say the least. I imagine you'll all find some excuse to kill each other, though. Pangaea immediately scolded him. Ham, don't be so pessimistic, she said. People can figure out how to get along. It's just when problems arise, they typically have two different ways of handling it, and without someone to mediate the various problems, sometimes violence can be a solution as to how to solve the problem quickly and efficiently. That's a very positive spin on war, Ham said. Oh, you just don't like humanity anymore. That's your problem. Volant, the bird-like tailor, came up from the floorboards once more. So, I see you're having trouble cutting back the root system of the tree. Well, I'm not too surprised. That thing is pretty good at being hostile. A lot of us know from personal experience. Why don't you try walking amongst the little Fae bazaar that seems to have accumulated around the tree? Everyone's talking about you and what you're doing, the various plans that could and could not be used. Perhaps they could enlighten you. Don't worry, you're not in any danger. When we meet in a large communal meeting like this, there's a very firm no-violence policy. So even if someone does want to do you harm, for whatever reason, they won't do it while in a large mass group like this. That would be a surefire way to meet the hangman's noose. Marty Drones, the dwarven archivist author, continuously pulled a small paper out of his coat pocket and pointed at Ham while referencing something to his holy deity. He whispered the words back and forth between her and the first and second throne, constantly pointing at Ham and the tree. If that's visions of the future, put it back in your pocket, Ham scolded him. Well, sir, if you don't mind, I'd like to accompany you on your little walk around the tree. Why's that? Ham said. No reason, just I wish to learn more about the Fae as well. You read something in that paper, didn't you? I have no idea what you're talking about. I didn't see any paper. Fine. Everyone who wants to come with me, come with. I'm going for a walk while I try to figure out how to cut down a tree that wants to fight back. Ham began to walk around the Fae Bazaar that had formed around the tree. Everywhere he could see, various mobile structures had landed and were beginning to sell various goods and wares. Some things were well within Ham's understanding, the occasional handcrafted piece of furniture, or the occasional piece of clothing or odd an end, such as dishware or food. But sometimes he saw technology that was way beyond anything he could understand, such as a machine that allowed you to compress three-dimensional objects onto paper, or a machine that allowed you to turn living people into something like statues. He didn't really understand the need for some of these items, but they seemed to sell nonetheless. Vicky, who had chosen to join Captain Ham, was delighted while moving through the Fey Market. She couldn't help but be amazed by the experience of having no one give a crap what she did. No matter how she moved her wings or flew about them, none of the Fey seemed to treat her as though she was any different. They never even looked at her with a passing glance. They were far more interested in the human-looking visitors, such as Marty Jones or Ham himself. As they walked about, they were the people out of place. Everyone was remarking on their human-like features, whispering if they were really from the upper rings. She sat down on the second throne's chair, firmly attached to her back, and looked at the first throne who was following close behind. "This is amazing. No one even cares that I have wings. No one even thinks it's all that special. I must say I rather like the Fae." "Yes, indeed, milady, but this will be a fleeting feeling. As soon as the Fae realize that you are indeed a holy deity, they will begin to regard you just as we do. I can assure you of that, so enjoy it while it lasts." "Oh, why do you gotta always rain on people's parades?" The large mass of living archivist suits then, suddenly, pointed at the distance. "Look at that! They have an entire club for gelatinous and slime-like entities, like us." Several of the people inside were made of translucent gel and waved back at the large black mass that was crawling upon the ground. "You can go in and talk to them if you want. You're not required to stay with me, and I can walk just perfectly fine with the two thrones." We will, milady. Thank you." The large mass then began to slide away, rolling around and separating into separate individuals who began to walk into the club. Ham turned back to look at them as they left the party. "So, Vicky, are they, like, dead, or what's the deal with the melted?" "Oh, they're not dead, but when you wear the suit for too long and it kind of melts you down, it's pretty easy to accidentally fuse with someone else who's also melted. After that, your personalities and memories become kind of mixed, and even if you separate again, you can't undo the damage that's been done from mixing with other people. So basically, the melted are a singular organism, a mass hive mind, until they separate again, and then they're basically a whole new person, an individual all to their own. But then, when they rejoin the giant mass, once more they are as one, like a drop of water in the ocean. It's not exactly death, but we do have a tendency to treat it that way. And sometimes the melted feel a little lonely in their predicament. The only way they can really stay individuals is by surrounding them in armored suits, like my thrones here. They can't merge with the giant mass of the melted, so they can't lose their individuality or their personal beings. If that is, as long as their suits aren't punctured too badly. If the suit breaks down and they melt out of them, it's a little too late. They probably would have to maintain their life force by merging with the rest of the mass, especially for any sort of emergency medical care. And after that, whatever was inside their suits is likely gone. "And what would you do if that happened?" "I would just have to let them go," she said. "It's not healthy for me to obsess over one person, especially when they can't stay with me. I outlive everyone who I care about. It's just part of life." The archivists then shared passing glances with each other around their holy deity, all of them communicating without words and only a glance, to not mention anything about the third throne, One Ring 2. A healthy distraction came in the form of a large lizard man that was standing amongst them. "Hello there, visitors. Care to see a little fire breathing?" Ham took a look at the large lizard-like creature's wings and the general shape of his face and body. "You're a dragon, is that correct?" "Indeed I am. Flight and fire breathing." "Oh, I have to see that. Show it to me," Ham said. The muscular dragon began to pose his impressive body, moving his hands back and forth in a way that looked somewhat familiar to Ham. As he put one of his hands over his mouth, he then began to blow a spray of vaporized venom, which then quickly caught on fire, and he began to spit the fire up into the air. Ham couldn't help but be impressed by the creature's showmanship. "Very impressive," Ham said. "It would be more impressive if you didn't have that device inside of your mouth, making a spark, but other than that, very cool." The dragon then quickly palmed the device back into his hand. "Damn it, how'd you know about that?" "Whilst I totally believe that a creature could evolve venom that could be flammable, I'm not going to believe that you would purposefully evolve something in your mouth to make a spark. That has to be man-made." The dragon began to blush. "All right, move on, stop making fun of me," he said as he continued to fire-breathe for other people that were looking on and clapping. As they continued to walk, Pangaea leaned down to Ham. "So, have you thought of how we're going to deal with the tree?" "Nope, I have no idea. Sometimes I think better when I'm not focusing on a problem. That's why we're going for a walk around the boardwalk and seeing all the fire-breathing dragons, and I'm surprised I haven't seen a unicorn. It's just a horse with a horn. Oh well, I suppose I'll see it eventually. Or maybe never, who knows." "Yes, but I know the inner workings of your mind. You've been trying to figure out the problem as we've been walking. Have you come up with anything at all?" "Well, the tree seems to be not entirely a plant, but not entirely an animal either. It's got to have some kind of vascular system. If we could get close enough to administer some kind of knockout drug to whatever brain-like mass it has, maybe that could make the entire tree docile enough for us to cut back its roots, but I haven't fully figured out if anything or anyone could get close enough to the tree to actually administer the drug to the right location of the tree. You'd have to get right up to it and actually inject it where we need it to actually function, so I have no idea. As far as I can tell, the tree has no discernible weaknesses, and I'd hate to destroy the thing or jettison it off into space." "Yes, I agree," said Pangaea, "but have you noticed what I've noticed?" "Not particularly. What is it that you're noticing?" A gentle hush then rolled over the crowd. Many of the strange creatures were pointing their various appendages at Ham and back at the tree, but Ham didn't exactly know what this meant. Ham stopped in front of a small bakery to look around. Nearly all of the Fae were looking at him and looking back at the tree. When Ham finally turned his head to gaze at the tree himself, he noticed that the tree seemed to be responding towards him. All of its branches seemed to lower in his direction, and there seemed to be eyeballs of all things, opening up from strange flowers and crevices in the tree to look back at Ham, zooming into him from even far away. "Has that thing been locking onto me this whole time?" Definitely as long as we've been walking," said Pangaea. "We really didn't say much because we wanted a bigger sample of you walking around and the tree tracking you, but yeah, it's looking at you." Marty Jones rode Ruby up next to Ham. This is what I wanted to tell you about, Ham. What I need is actually in that tree, and if you could just... No telling me the future. We will have none of that. I am not a chosen one." Just then, the owner of the bakery chimed in from behind the counter. It was a large mass of rubber-coated tendrils that mostly resembled certain genitalia. "You sure look like the chosen one to me," it said, moving its tendrils about, coating them in some kind of rubber protective material before handling what was available under the counter. "Can I offer you any donuts or any sort of breads?" "It is a bakery after all," it said, trying to offer him something forward. "All right, there's no way that thing is actually looking at me from that distance." The tendril monster then moved one of its large tentacles with an eyeball outside of the bakery to look back at the tree. "No, it's definitely looking at you. Every single eyeball seems to be tracking your exact position. I've never seen the Blightwood tree behave in such a manner. You're definitely the chosen one there, kiddo." "I'm like 40 years old. Actually, no, I'm more like 600 years old or some shit. I'm not a kid. Oh, sorry, I can't tell if you haven't noticed. My entire body is made of genitalia, so I don't really know how age works. Can I get you anything? A donut? A Swiss roll, perhaps? Do you have pepperoni rolls? Yes. I'm going to need about 50 of those if I'm going to deal with any chosen one nonsense. The creature then handed Ham a plastic bag that was filled to the brim with pepperoni rolls. Here you go, sir. On the house, although I wouldn't mind a tip, it said, winking to Pangea, who then offered something in a tip jar. They're all knob-made in the back, it said, moving its tendrils about. Hope you don't mind, I don't have any hands. Oh, it's perfectly fine, said Ham. I'm old enough that I don't care about that kind of stuff anymore, he said, taking a bite of one of the pepperoni rolls. Okay, Marty Jones, tell me exactly what I'm supposed to be doing. They reconvened in front of the train car that they had originally rode in on. This time the Navy officers, who had stayed behind during Ham's walk, joined in as well. They were interested in seeing whatever they could inside the large eldritch tree. Marty Jones once more pulled out the paper and opened it up. I'm not going to bore you with all the details or even get too much into them. I'm just going to say that from what I can discern from this series of poems on this small piece of paper, is that you have to reinstate the gravity on this ring. After doing so, the tree won't be able to move around as much. Its limbs will be too heavy. See how most of them are above where gravity actually takes effect, and it's just swinging them in, somewhat like splashing in a puddle of water? That's for a reason. After that, you can just walk right up to the tree. I promise it won't be hostile to you. That's what I can discern from these poems, at least. Why won't it be hostile to me? Ham asked. Marty Jones looked at the paper once more. I don't know, but I think you'll get an answer to that inside the tree itself. I also want an answer to some of my questions, like why we were left behind on Earth, why we had to stow away, why we're considered lesser on this giant ship of yours. All of those answers, from my understanding, are inside of that tree. And Miss Vicky, he said, pointing at his holy deity, I have a suspicion you're going to want to go in there as well. No, said the First Throne. That Lovecraftian horror is likely too dangerous for our holy deity. I can assure you it's not, Marty Jones said as he presented the paper up to the First Throne. The First Throne began to read the passage out loud. In twilight's hush, where shadows creep, an eldritch tree from slumber deep unfurled its gaze, a vision wide, with eyes that held the cosmic tide. No leaves it bore, but tendrils long, that writhed and whispered an ancient song. And from the void, a seraph bright descended on wings of fourfold light. No halo crowned her golden head, but wisdom's fire within her spread. She paused before the gnarled embrace of branches etched in time and space. The tree then stirred, its great eyes gleamed, and secrets flowed, a whispered stream. Not spoken words, but thoughts conveyed to ears that heard what stars had made. Of swirling nebulae's grand design, and dark matter's hidden shrine, of worlds beyond our mortal kin, and fates entwined again. An angel listened calm and still, as cosmic truths began to fill her mind with wonder vast and deep, while shadows danced their vigil keep. And when the dawn began to break, the secrets whispered for her sake were locked within her heart's embrace, a gift from the strange and mystic place. The First Throne sat there for a moment, pondering what the poem meant. Then he looked out at the large eldritch tree. Well, nothing to do left but proceed forward with caution, I suppose. Seriously? Ham said. That little poem is all the concrete evidence you need to say that we're safe walking up to that gigantic tree entity thing? And you know what? I'm not going to think about it. I'm just going to accept it and move on, he said, pulling out one of the pepperoni rolls and stuffing it into his face. I'm gonna die eventually. Might as well be from a giant tree. Ham looked out at the large tree on the horizon. Do we even have something capable of knocking out whatever we need to knock out inside of it? If we actually get inside, that is. Pangaea then handed Ham a small syringe. This should be powerful enough. He looked at what was now inside of his palm. Where did you get this? I actually took the time to listen to Marty Jones, and I've been fabricating it inside the ship, and then I had one of my drones run it to me when we needed it. Okay, no more looking at the future around me. That includes everyone here. No mas. No more. I'm looking at all of you. He placed the syringe into his pocket. Alright, let's start walking towards this darn tree and figure out what's what. First things first, though, he said, looking out at the large tree. Marty, you said that if I re-engaged gravity, that would basically render the tree defenseless, as most of its limbs would be too heavy to move, correct? Yes, sir, I believe so. Alright, Pangaea, open a comm. I'm gonna have to talk to the entirety of Ring 3 so that they don't freak out when things start getting heavy. I'll give them a few minutes, that way they can land whatever they got in the sky and prepare as best they can. Of course. Pangaea got down and began looking intently at Ham. Camera's on. You should appear in the sky momentarily. Just then, a large image began to broadcast over the sky. Most of the image was occluded by foliage or broken sun lamps and the like, but for the most part, it could be well understood as to who was looking down on them. This is Captain Ham, current operating captain of the ship Pangaea. Attention residents of Ring 3. I'm going to have to turn your gravity back on so that we can do proper landing procedures and I can deal with this blightwood tree. So those of you who are not currently surrounding the tree, I suggest you get ready for full level gravity to be installed across the entire ring in only a few minutes. You have that time to land whatever you got flying or prepare anything you need to prepare. After that, gravity's going to be turned back on, so I hope you're all ready. She then ended the transmission. I like your messages. They're short, sweet, and to the point. Well, I'm not a very charismatic guy, said Ham, so I just gotta spit out what I gotta spit out, and if everyone doesn't like it, whatever. So, tell me though, is this ring actually prepared to start turning again? It's not exactly perfectly in line for turning. It's not on its axis the right way. It's welded permanently in place, but as long as we rotate the center of the ship, it should get its gravity back just fine, and since we're now in orbit of the planet, and the planet's keeping us anchored in place, we don't have to worry about navigational corrections. We can just spin the ship and give them gravity again. It's the only way we can allow the city tiles to land properly anyway, so we have to do it. Okay, said Ham. Start spinning this thing. I suggest everyone here hang on to something. All of the archivists immediately performed a defensive ring around their holy deity, hanging on as best they could. The various Fae who had seen the message did their best to secure their mobile homes and various assets from the impending gravity coming towards them. Then, the entire ship felt as though it was shaking. Everyone felt a small jolt to one direction. That is the ring beginning to turn, Ham said as he hung on for dear life. Don't worry, it'll start spinning very slowly at first. After the rather disruptive feel of the ring beginning to spin, it started to slowly accelerate. As it did, the artificial gravity plates at long last began to shut off. Mounds of dirt that were held perfectly still for years now experienced a completely different form of gravity, and the earth itself began to slide all around the ring. The sound of crackling branches began to deafen everyone on the ring, as large trees that were now nearly 2,000 meters tall began crashing down to the ground below. The final tree to succumb to gravity was the blightwood tree itself. Its limbs began to droop down to the ground below, Rather than tendriling through the air as they had done, almost as if the tree was underwater, they now drooped down like a weeping willow. As they were all listening to the far-off sounds of crackling wood, Pangaea was the first to break the silence. The ring is now spinning at optimal speeds for normal gravity. Everything is in place the way it should be. Ham, we have successfully installed gravity on Ring 3. All we have to do now is cut the roots of that tree, and landing procedures can begin on this ring. Would you like me to start passing out rations now? Large containers of farming equipment and the like? Yes, said Ham. Tell the synths to go ahead and start doing that, but hand them to the people, not the individual tiles. No point in leaving rations on a tile that's not even going to be populated. Of course. Do you want us to even focus on those tiles landing? Oh, absolutely. You never know if some people will decide to inhabit that tile, so I want it to land on the planet just like every other tile. That way, people can occupy the area if they want to. Of course, they'll have to do some wood chopping, he said, looking at the large trees that now were strewn about the ground. I hope the Fae won't be too upset about the mass destruction of their forests, Ham said. Lysandra, looking out from Volit's balcony, waved her clawed hand. No, we kind of figured something like this would happen. We were anticipating a full-blown, cleansing of our unclean DNA, so we'll take a little forest destruction in exchange for getting to go down to the planet. It's not a big deal. Okie dokie, if you say so, said Ham, as he gave the Spider-Woman a thumbs up. Let's go talk to this giant tree monster. The walk over to the Blightwood tree was silent and somewhat ominous. It felt as though Ham was walking for perhaps days, even though the tree didn't seem to get any bigger the longer he walked, until eventually, the tree was just a vertical surface now looming right over him, so far up that he couldn't imagine climbing it, couldn't imagine anything getting over it. This is a pretty big tree, he said, looking up at the large wooden surface. Occasionally, the tree had a crack in it where an eyeball was peering through and looking over at Ham. They're all looking at me, aren't they? Every single one. Dang, that is so creepy. I do not like it at all. I wonder if it can communicate with us, Vicky happily said. She then pressed her face up close to one of the eyeballs, forcing it to gaze at her instead of Ham. Excuse me, we wish to come inside and speak to you, if possible. Is there an opening in which we can get inside? Much to their surprise, the tree actually responded. Its eyeballs all gestured to a large leaf that suddenly curled itself back, revealing a hole large enough for most of them to fit inside, except of course Pangaea, who was simply too large. She would be forced to wait outside the tree. Go ahead, she said. If there's any trouble, she then pounded her fist against her hand. I'm pretty certain I can take on this tree. I can just rip it right open and get you out, if need be. Something tells me that won't be necessary, Ham said, but thank you nonetheless. They then began to venture into the tree. As they ventured into the darkened cave of the tree, the Navy officers who were joining Ham pulled out their flashlights and turned them on to allow everyone to see. Their fingers were buzzing at a rapid rate on their radio devices. They were speaking in a coded language called ClickPen, reporting everything back to the Grand Admiral. The clicking somewhat got on Ham's nerve, but he allowed it. He understood they were just doing their job. And if that was all he had to endure to get their flashlights, he would put up with it. Ham looked up at the archivists, who didn't seem that bothered by the darkness. How do you guys see without flashlights or any sort of assistance? The archivist looked back at Ham. Oh yes, our apologies, said the First Throne. We forget that our rubber suits allow us to increase our senses. We can actually all see in pitch black just fine. They then activated some flashlights on their various gear, allowing them to illuminate the area alongside the Navy officers. We forgot that not everyone else can see in the dark. Our bad. With the place now freshly illuminated, they couldn't help but notice the outline of what appeared to be a person trapped against the wall of the inside of the cave. "What the hell is that?" said Ham, as he approached the person-like figure on the side of the wall. As he reached his hand out and touched it, it began to ride and thrive within the wall. It was almost as if it was trying to escape. An eyeball opened up out of the wall to gaze at Ham. Ham then looked back at the eye and gave it a clear order. "Whoever this is stuck in your body, let them out. Let them out right now." The eyeball rolled back and forth before eventually closing, and then the wall seemed to flex for a moment before the person inside burst forward from the wall. They fell down to the ground in a pool of some kind of fluid. Ham looked at the person that was revealed to be a man with large wings on his back, insect-like wings and antennae sticking out of his head. "Oh man, do I know that feeling." "Is this real?" he asked. Yeah, this is real." We have to find a way out." Ham then pointed in a direction. "The exit's that way, dude." "I'm sorry," he said, "but I want to leave now. I want to leave." He then ran off into the darkness to find the exit. "I don't suppose you guys have any, maybe luminescent things that we could put on the wall to help guide people out if we find any more?" "We're already on it," said one of the first thrones as he began attaching something to the wall. Everywhere they went, there was either large tendrils or cocoons that contained people inside. Every time, Ham tapped on the wall and ordered the tree to let them go. And every single time, the tree rolled its eyes a bit before doing exactly that. "If you know I'm going to tell you to let them go, why don't you just let them all go already?" he argued with one of the eyeballs on the tree. Eventually it got to the point that the tree was beginning to release people as Ham simply walked by, rather than waiting for him to give the order. A naga-like creature burst from one of the tentacles, squirting itself out onto the floor, before an additional naga began to writhe from inside of its own body and crawl its way out. "Free at last! We're free at last!" they said as they began to slither towards the exit. All of the archivists simply pointed the way, and reassured them that they were leaving, if they continued on to follow the lights. As they continued to walk forward, Ham couldn't notice, but there was a small light at the end of the tunnel. "Certainly we didn't walk through the entire tree," Ham said. "We've been walking up and down. We should be just in the center of it." As he continued to approach, he saw the remnants of an old building. It was made of brick, metal, and plaster, just like any building was. The lights were still on, but the building itself was horribly misshapen. The roof was now bent, the walls had nearly caved in, and as far as he could tell, the tree was doing its best to maintain the building's overall shape. Bo came up from behind and picked up Ham, putting him on his back. "Let's act with some caution, in case we suddenly have to run out of here." Marty Jones looked back at Ham and Bo. "I actually concur myself. Although the poem guarantees our safety temporarily, it doesn't guarantee our safety when leaving the tree. So I think we should approach with some caution. Looks like, to get inside, all we have to do is rip this old door off of its hinges." Marty Jones pointed at a door. The frame was completely misshapen and the door itself was rotten. It wouldn't be hard to rip it off of its hinges. The first throne did exactly that, doing so with ease, as he brought the door down to the ground, causing its glass to shatter. "No alarms," Marty Jones mentioned. "Seems like whatever's inside doesn't have any real security to speak of." They cautiously then approached the lab. As they ventured inside the laboratory, viny tendrils covered the floor, walls, and ceiling. Everywhere they stepped, they risked tripping over the vines that now pumped with some kind of luminescent fluid inside, all of them guiding them down the halls into a central room. As they continued to walk down the corridors of the laboratory, the various archivists couldn't help themselves but to try and pick up the small pieces of literature that were strewn about the floors, the occasional turned-over filing cabinet and piece of research laying on the tables. Ham looked back at Marty Jones, who was desperately trying to pick up a piece of paper off the ground while still on Ruby's back. "I think you guys might have some kind of unhealthy addiction to knowledge." "I wouldn't call it unhealthy," Marty Jones said as he scooped up the piece of paper. "It's just that knowledge is power, and when you understand everything, you have all of the power, and then you get to decide your fate, not leave it up to random chance or other people who will leave you behind." "I suppose that's fair," Ham said. Just then they passed a humanoid figure that gave them quite the startle as it looked deceased laying upon a filing cabinet, motionless and still, its vacant eyes staring back at them. "Holy moly," Marty Jones said. "Relax," Ruby assured him. "It's one of those maid things, the Luli maids. It's harmless. It looks like it's powered down," she said, touching the robot. It fell to the ground with a clatter and one of its arms fell off. "Looks like it's been rotting here for quite some time. Rust has done its damage. Couldn't reactivate it even if we tried." "Interesting," the small man said from the synth's back as he looked down at the broken robot. "Say, Mr. Ham, didn't you say that these were incredibly high-end robots that weren't available to—" As Marty Jones looked up, he saw Ham's vacant expression as he was looking into a doorway leading into a large central room. "Mr. Ham, is something wrong? Captain?" Ham pat the back of the incredibly muscular synth he was riding on. "Bo, let me down for a second," he said, as he cautiously entered the room. Every single surface in the room was filled with some kind of living tendril or part of the tree that was pulsing with some kind of fluid passing through it. A clear, complicated vascular system, all of them leading to a central woman who was now permanently fused into the wall. Her arms were now fused to her sides, and her hands fused together around her now swollen belly. She looked like she was sleeping, somewhat peaceful. In single file formation, everyone managed to crawl their way into the room. The doors allowed for larger beings, like the first throne, but it was still tight for much larger beings even than that, like the second throne, who was now forced on all fours. "What's going on in here? Ham, do you know this person?" they said, gesturing to the woman who was now permanently fused to the wall. "Jubilee," Ham said, as he began to approach the woman fused into the wall. Upon Ham's approach, the woman's eyes opened. Then, she began to speak, but not only her mouth. Several other orifices all around the tree began to speak as well, giving her voice an echoey and somewhat ominous presence as she began to boom, shaking the very tree itself. "Ham, it's been so long since I've last seen you." Ham stood there, almost baffled and not knowing what to say. "Is it actually you?" "Yes, Ham," Jubilee confirmed. "It's been a very long time and a very bumpy ride, but yes, it is me. It's good to see you again. I almost wasn't certain that it was you when I saw you far away and in the sky. Thought my mind might have been playing tricks on me, but now that you're here and I can sense your familiar smell, your familiar presence, I can confirm it's actually you. Welcome. I suppose I have a lot of explaining to do as to why I'm, well, like this." Marty Jones leaned in closer to the Ham, upon Ruby's back. "Ham, who is this woman, and how do you know her?" "We know each other from back on Earth. We were dating for a time. We knew each other quite well. But I don't understand how she's here." Upon the answer to Marty Jones' question, they heard a loud voice coming from outside of the tree. As well, Ham heard a duplicate of the voice inside his own head via his neural implant. "What? Who is this woman?" It was Pangea. She was showing a hint of jealousy. "Calm down, Pangea. We broke things off before I got onto the ship." "Before you got onto the ship?" Pangea said. "That barely means you broke up at all. Who is this woman?" Pangea was trying to get a better line of sight on the woman inside of the tree, but Ham denied Pangaea any access to his optical nerves. Jubilee continued to speak. "It's good to see you again after such a long time. I take it you slept well in stasis? No problems or health side effects?" "None to speak of," said Ham. "It was kind of odd spending all my time doing ship maintenance pretty much while solving puzzles and enjoying a relaxing, infinite vacation on the beach. I even got married to the ship, hence her screaming from outside. But I suppose everything went according to plan. How are you here? How are you on Ring 3? You weren't even scheduled to be on the Pangaea." Jubilee stretched what remained of her humanoid body as it was stuck to the wall. "Oh, last-minute change of plans. My work, as you know, was in genetic research, and they required me aboard the Pangaea to ensure that the people of Pangaea didn't develop any unknown side effects from having such close quarters contact with each other, basically to avoid inbreeding and the like. I suppose when this ring shut down, there must have been some kind of accident in the laboratory because I woke up like this, with no ability to move or even call for help. So, how have things been going since you've awakened from stasis?" "How have things been going?" repeated Ham. "Things have been pretty awful, if I have to be specific. Up on Ring 1, it's controlled completely by the Navy, or some kind of tyrannical military force." "Hey," said the two Navy officers behind him. "No offense, guys. I managed to befriend them and we're cooperating to get down on the planet. There also is this other crazier, kind of like weirdly racist force called the Missionaries that apparently they don't hate any one race in particularly. They just hate when those two races were to get together and like cooperate or something like that. I don't really understand it myself. Ring 2 is just a complete and total mess of poverty and everyone's at war with each other. And then you have all these weirdos on Ring 3. No offense, guys, if there's anyone here that can hear me. But I just don't know. Things have been just so crazy, it feels like I'm cursed." "Oh, don't say that," Jubilee said. Ham took a deep breath. "I am happy to see you again. Feels like I didn't say a proper goodbye to you when we parted ways back on Earth. After all, we were, lovers for a while. I feel like I should have made more of a ceremony in saying goodbye to you, but we were both so busy." "Oh, that's perfectly all right," said Jubilee. "We get the chance now to say goodbye. So tell me about this new relationship you're in. Didn't you say you were married to the computer? How is that working?" "Oh yeah," said Ham. "If you've been stuck like this ever since Ring 3 shut down, I suppose you wouldn't know. The automated robots that are going all up and down the ship have gained sentience, and they have these really impressive bodies," he said, pointing to Ruby. "As you can see, they're fully synthetic life forms made of rubber and steel, but they're robots, but not quite robots. They're really impressive things. I've been trying to make sense of them myself. And they run the entire ship now, so I guess they're going to be a whole species to themselves on the new planet we're going to. Isn't that impressive?" "It certainly is," said Jubilee. "So, tell me," Ham asked, "what exactly got you into this tree predicament? You said there was an accident or something when Ring 3 was shutting down? Was this your biological research laboratory or something?" "Oh yes," Jubilee said. "When the ring had a sudden failure of some kind and stopped abruptly, I must have been tossed around in the laboratory and I guess I got exposed to some things, and then when I woke up I was this gigantic tree creature bursting out of the laboratory." Just then, Marty Jones tapped Ham on the shoulder. Quietly, ever so quietly so that no one could hear him, he whispered to Ham, "She's lying." Ham started thinking about what Marty Jones had said, while Pangaea was making an abrupt amount of noise from outside of the tree. "I don't know what you're all doing in there, but you better not get any ideas, you eldritch hussy. He's in the world of Skynet now. That's my man, not yours. Whatever it is you two had, that was hundreds of years ago. I've been with him a lot longer." Some of the branches managed to smack Pangea away for a moment, while she was making noise outside. Ham, during the momentary distraction, began to think to himself. "You said that this all happened when Ring 3 shut down? The sudden stop and the inertia probably caused, chemicals to spill on you or something?" "Oh yes," Jubilee said. "I was working on this fantastic idea called the forced compatibility sequence, and well, as you can see, I've been a little bit infected, and somehow, entities are merging into my body all the time. And this is what happened." Marty Jones began scribbling something down on his notebook. He then handed the notebook to Ham for him to hold up to his face. The message was quite clear. It was the actual time frame for when this tree supposedly appeared, as testified by the Fae. As well, the need for the forced compatibility virus did not arise until long after the ship's departure, and the ring had only shut down nearly 60 years after they had been in space. Finally, the pieces were beginning to be put together inside of Ham's mind. "Jubilee," Ham said, "could you be honest with me for a second? Why were you actually on this ship?" Jubilee laughed. I told you, Ham. I need to be here for genetic research purposes. I'm in a genetic research laboratory. I was trying to help the people of the ship, and things went wrong." Ham shook his head up and down. "Yeah, sure." He then pulled his pistol off of his side. He pointed the double-barrel 1911 up at one of the eyeballs on the wall. "Is that actually why you're on this ship?" Jubilee acted somewhat startled by his actions. "I don't understand what you mean. Why the hell are you pointing a gun at one of my eyes? Don't do that. That could seriously hurt me." "I know," said Ham. "I was just hoping for some honesty from you. After all, I've just now noticed something I didn't notice in all the time we were together." "And what's that?" asked Jubilee. "When we first met, you were older than me. I remember you talked me into dating an older woman. When we parted ways, you were younger than me. In fact, now that I think about it, you look exactly the same now, minus the obvious mutations, as the first day we ever met. You haven't aged a day. You never seem to age. And I know of only one reason why a person would not age." Jubilee tried to explain herself. "The accident in the lab, it did many odd things to my DNA, including halting my aging. Can't you see? I'm trapped in this gigantic tree of my own body. It's my own prison made of myself. Allow me to explain everything, Ham." Ham then fired the weapon, hitting one of the eyeballs, causing her a sudden jolt of pain. "That's bullshit," Ham said. "Ring 3 didn't shut down until year 60 of travel. It took a long time for Ring 3 to eventually give up, and if you were as old as you were when we got on this ship, you should have already been dead of old age by then. How did you last so long?" Ham was breathing heavily as he fired another shot into one of the eyes, causing her another jolt of pain. "Ouch!" she wailed, as the tree began to move back and forth, shaking the room they were in. "Stop it! That hurts a lot." "I would imagine so," said Ham. "Now, tell me the truth. How did you last so long on Ring 3? Jubilee began to weep from the eyes on her human body, as well as many of the eyes that were around the room. "Ham, I don't understand why you're doing this. Why are you being so mean and cruel? I've made it here. We're together again. Shouldn't that be what's important? What does it matter how I got here?" Ham's eyes grew red. His heart was beating with adrenaline as he began to point the gun to her human head on the wall. "I don't know if this damage will kill you. It likely won't, considering what's all around me, but I know it'll hurt. Now tell me honestly, how did you get on Ring 3? Jubilee was now practically begging Ham. If you just tell me what has gotten you into this mood, what's so wrong about me being here, I could answer you. What's the matter? The two of them locked eyes for a moment, and immediately, they both knew what the other knew. Maybe not with complete accuracy, but they both had a very firm hunch. Jubilee took a deep breath. Tell me how much you actually know. Do you know everything? Ham put the pistol back into his holster. Yes, I know about the Puritans. Jubilee swallowed, took a moment to compose herself before she stopped crying and looked at him with all of the eyes around the room. So, how much do you know? And how did you find out? I found their secret little room, hidden on the Pangea. I also managed to track down one of the Puritans on Ring 1. Did you? Jubilee asked. And what did she have to say? Wouldn't know, Ham said. The second I realized what the Puritans were all about, I had her killed. Jubilee looked shocked for a moment. No! Ham, you couldn't have. I did, Ham said. It was one of the easiest things I've ever ordered. How do you think I wouldn't do it? The expression on Jubilee's face was that of shock, disbelief, and betrayal. She was baffled, almost as though she couldn't speak to comment on what Ham had done. Ham, you're not a murderer. How could you do something so awful? How could I do something so awful? The Puritans traffic human children. That's how I could do something so awful, because it's not awful. Of course I'd have them killed, anyone would. Jubilee shook her head. Ham, you don't understand. You just don't understand. If you just calm down, I can explain everything. You want me calm, so you can explain things? Ham repeated. Fine, I'm calm. Begin explaining yourself. Tell me. Tell me exactly why it's okay for you to take children from their families and do... Ham looked so angry he could draw the pistol again. Tentacles began to dislodge themselves from the ceiling and began to lower themselves down towards Ham. Ham moved strategically to get away from them, but Jubilee reassured him that she wasn't doing anything hostile. Just sit down for a moment. I'll explain everything. You just don't understand. You think we're your enemies, but we're not. We, Ham repeated. You're one of them. You're a Puritan. That's why you don't age. Oh, my God, Ham said. I feel like I'm going to throw up again. What is this, like the 7th time? Now, Ham, relax, Jubilee said. You probably have the wrong impression of us. You think that we're out to hurt humanity, but we're not. We do not seek humanity's downfall. How long? How long have you been a Puritan? Ham asked. How long have I not known who you really were? Jubilee shook her head. You've always known who I was. You've always known me. I am a lot older than you. By a few hundred years. I've been a Puritan long before you were born. But you've always known who I was. I have never been deceitful to you about who I am, just deceitful about what I am. Now, let me explain. They all stared at Jubilee, as though they were looking at an alien from outer space, not knowing what to make of them. They all seemed as though they were ready to go hostile at any moment, but Jubilee cleared her throat and began telling her tale to them anyway. Yes, I'm a Puritan, she said. I would imagine if you've already been inside of the secret little hideaway we had on this ship, you've probably already surmised that this is actually a Puritan ship, not a human ship. We are from Earth, just like you. We're humans, just like you. We've just been altered slightly. We've ascended. Fucking great, Ham said. Who wrote this little speech for you? One of those little writers for those horny little vampire novels that they sell to preteen girls? Jubilee laughed. Actually, you're closer to the truth on that than you think. we're the ones who write, I'd say at least about 60% of those novels, trying to change humanity's opinion of us, or at least creatures like us. Ugh, Ham said in disgust. Now just allow me to explain, she said. We Puritans do feed on humans in order to maintain our eternal life. That is true, but there are 3 different types of Puritans. There are those of us that in order to live as long as we do have to consume She stopped herself mid-sentence. Veal. We have to eat veal. That is what some of us eat. And then there are some others of us, like myself, who prefer beef. It is different than eating veal. You have to consume a lot more in order to get the same life energy, and it is not nearly as refreshing, I'll say that, but things are better that way, at least from my perspective. And then there's a third variety that, let's say, makes their own lab-grown beef. We all disagree with each other, but we also all respect each other and that we are all Puritans. It's sort of a species name by now, though it didn't used to be. And we have been caring for humanity for many, many years, operating in the shadows and helping to make things better. Better? Ham repeated. Since when does some life-draining monster want to make things better for their prey? Don't say prey, Jubilee scolded. You're not prey, you're more like cattle, like I was saying. She looked at Ham's expression and noticed that was the wrong choice of words. I'm sorry, but there's no other way to explain it. There is no farmer in the world that has disdain for the animals he cares for. You want what's best for your livestock, after all, and humanity is our livestock. We hold humans as sacred and valuable. We hold humans as more valuable than humans hold humans. It's just that, along with that extra value, we also hold ourselves as being even more valuable than that. If you can understand that, then you could see how maybe there might be a miscommunication between us. Ham scoffed. That is highly doubtful. And that doesn't explain why the Puritans built this ship, why we're traveling through space, why you're in a tree. I want some real answers, or I'm gonna shoot you in the head. Jubilee tried to calm Ham down. Okay. I'm giving you the answers. I'm going to cooperate. Really, no human should know anything about us, but I suppose it's too little too late now. How far exactly does this information contaminate go? Does everyone know about us? Everyone on the ship. Ham was bluffing, but he saw no reason to give her any sort of way out. Well, shit, Jubilee said. Hundreds of close calls over the years, but this'll be the first time it's actually gotten out into the public knowledge. But I suppose there's no stopping it. So, we Puritans all come from a singular source. I won't tell you what that source is. I won't betray my own kind, after all, even if I'm not considered a Puritan anymore. You're not considered a Puritan anymore, huh? Ham looked around at the large tree exterior. Yeah, I'm guessing you're probably not a Puritan anymore. I take it your little story about an accident in the lab was likely true, just lied about the timeline. Yes, Jubilee confirmed. We've existed on Earth for a very long time. We have a central source that allows us to make more of ourselves, but that central source is singular in nature, and there can never be any more than one of them, for whatever reason. And as I said, we have differing opinions on how humans should be treated in the various parts of society. Because of this, we often conflict with each other on who has the right to own the thing that allows us to make more of ourselves. Everything was fine when we all lived on Earth, because we were all eggs in the same basket, but when we went to the entire solar system and began growing human colonies on places like Jupiter and Mars, things got rather complicated. The System War, Ham said. Are you saying that you all were the ones who started the System War? Yes, Jubilee confirmed. Originally, we had all agreed to not use humans as our troops in the system war, and it was supposed to be a secretive Cold War. But unfortunately, some of us got tempted when we were seizing victory, and, well, things got out of hand. We nearly wiped each other out. There was almost a time in which there were no Puritans left. That is what forced us to try and end the war, but by that time, human actors had taken control of many of the, well, assets of war, along with many of the positions of power, and we couldn't stop things. It was nearly the end of everything. If humans go, we go. We couldn't allow it. That's why the Pangea was constructed, to get us out here. And that's the extent of what I know. They don't tell me much of anything because I'm not on the team that won. You're a prisoner, Ham said. That's correct. I'm here against my will, but I'm cooperating, because after all, a world run by Puritans is a world worth fighting for, trust me. That's highly doubtful, Ham said. You said that there were 3 different types of Puritans and that only one won the war. Is that correct? Yes, Jubilee replied. The ones who eat veal are the ones who won, and they've been using it as their main life-sustaining force ever since. I, as one of the ones who eat beef, not veal, beef, was considered useful but not trustworthy. They kept me aboard this ship so that they could use my genetic research prowess, and that we could find some solutions for taking care of humanity in the future. Really? Like what? Ham asked. The elves, on Ring 4. I don't know if you've seen them yet. I've not. I've been going 1, 2, 3, 4, that's the order of the rings. Suppose I'll be seeing them after this. Good, Jubilee replied. They're my finest work. They're, I wouldn't say slaves, but they're very enthusiastic workers that don't even need someone forcing them to work. They do everything on their own, and they do it well. They enjoy it, in fact. They are crucial assets to humanity's future and their success. Trust me. You expect me to trust a being that literally just said that you work for a group of people that exploit children and make slaves? Well, Jubilee replied, when you say it like that, yes, I could see how this would be a problem, but if you just open your mind a bit and keep an open mind, I can assure you that there are some benefits. Benefits for you, Ham replied. Benefits for all of us. This is a better way. I can prove it to you. Can you now? Ham said. Somehow I doubt that. Ham and Jubilee's discussion went in circles for a bit. She repeated the same information at least 3 more times before Ham started shouting with an angry face, until eventually, Ruby and Bo grabbed him by the shoulders and made him separate, sitting him down in the corner, away from Jubilee. Then, Marty Jones approached. Madam, I came here to ascertain the answers to a few questions I've had, but clearly, there's a lot more important things to talk about. But if you could indulge my personal intrigue, may I ask, do you still consume the flesh of living people? Yes, she said, but not in the same way, not under the same compulsion. This tree is perfectly self-sustaining. I have this unresistible desire to create more and more, and I do it within the confines of my own body. Something about the force compatibility sequence inside my body has made me a carrier, and I drag people off to harvest their genetic material and breed them together. I can't explain why, or why I'm so compelled to do it, but that is the answer. And I no longer seek out people to devour. It's only anyone who comes close to me. I see, Marty Jones said. And what about the young? They are perfectly safe around me. I would never. I never have, I never would, I never will. Even back when I was a Puritan, I never did. I find it repulsing. I see. Marty Jones began writing in his book her answers. And I would suppose that the other Puritans find you repulsing? the other factions who consume of a different diet? Yes, she replied. They do in fact find me repulsing. They do not agree with my lifestyle or the way I choose to maintain my own immortal life. And we often have the difficulty of understanding each other or getting along. It's been frequent. I see. Marty Jones continued to write down what she was saying. For my last question, I'll be quite frank. Why did you leave the dwarves back on Earth? Why were we considered so obsolete, not welcome in human society? Are we truly just some rogue variable to be eliminated or something? Jubilee looked around the room at the judgmental eyes staring back at her before taking another deep breath. Dwarves are important only to one branch of the Puritans, my branch. From the way we feed upon humans, an adult male or an adult female of normal size can certainly sustain us for a time, but we must seclude ourselves during that period, lest people notice that we have a certain healthy proportion to us as a result of our consumption. Dwarves are small, and your life force can be harvested the same as a normal human adult. It is that simple. Consuming one of you means that we must not fast for months on end. It allows us to join normal human society and can tide us over while we get work done. Marty Jones looked somewhat horrified. So then the reason we were left behind on Earth, the reason we were considered so other from the rest of humanity is... You're a grab-and-go snack to us, yes. And the other Puritans find that disgusting and didn't want to support it here on this new world. By the goddess, Marty Jones said. The reason for our segregation, the reason for everything is just that we're an easily consumed item. He looked almost horrified as he moved away. I'm so sorry, Jubilee said. But on the bright side, we did manage to cure nearly all of your genetic faults. No more do you suffer from random organ failure. Your arms are perfectly limber. You'll never see a dwarf walking on crutches, as they did in ancient times. You're all perfectly healthy, your own species, practically, and yet one with humanity. We never considered you different or lesser. In fact, we owe much of our existence to you. So do not consider yourself so inferior to your fellow man. You're in fact just as important as they are. Maybe even more so, as you allowed for us to take full control of many parts of the world in which we had to. Ham re-entered the conversation with a rather aggressive tone. You talk as though you celebrate your own existence, as though you're happy to do what you do. I am happy to do what I do, answered Jubilee. I won't deny it. I enjoy every part of being a Puritan. All Puritans enjoy being themselves. Maybe we feel guilty in doing it in certain ways, but at the end of the day, she began thinking about what she was saying and stopped. I'm sorry, Ham. It's difficult for me to explain this to you. You cannot expect a cow to look upon the grass and treat it as an equal, for it is blades of grass. You cannot expect a farmer to look upon the cow and look at it as though it was looking upon another farmer, for it is a cow. And you cannot expect us to look at the farmer and say the same. I'm sorry, Ham, I care deeply about your existence, she said. But I care about my own existence and the existence of my own kind a little bit more. All right, Ham said. I think I've had enough of this little reunion. I can't believe we ever slept together. He heard a loud what from outside, which he knew was Pangea banging on the side of the tree. Either way, he said, pulling the small syringe out of his pocket, I need to inject you with this. What is that? She asked. This is a substance that hopefully is going to knock you out cold so we can finally cut back your roots. Yeah, I was going to talk to you about that. You know that hurts like hell. I don't care, Ham said. Enjoy the surgery, I guess. I'm going to inject you with this and knock you out, and then I'm going to head down to Ring 4 and finish up we can land this fucking ship once and for all. You're going to allow me to live? She said, almost surprised. I was expecting you to jettison me into space or, kill me. A lot of the people of Ring 3 seem to hold you as some kind of value, and destroying you would be a huge issue that I don't want to deal with. Along with that, if you're true about only hurting people who come close to you, then I suppose all people have to do is stay away. For those reasons, I'll go ahead and let you live. After all, if I don't need to get involved in something, I really shouldn't. Jubilee laughed. Your apathy is a very attractive quality to us. Always has been. Ham looked back at her with a bit of disgust. Oh, come on. I meant that as a compliment. I wasn't attacking you. He shook his head and pulled the needle out, preparing to stick it somewhere. Where should I stick this thing where it will work the most? Marty Jones then pointed at Jubilee's human body. Likely right there. The drug's pretty powerful, just a drop of it could nearly kill a rhino, so I imagine it should knock her out in no time at all. Ham approached and was preparing to stick the needle in when she interrupted him. Hold on a moment. Just one last thing. If there were a way that we could just coexist on the same planet, while maybe turning a blind eye in certain circumstances or allowing for biological necessity in certain regards, is there a way that maybe an open Puritan and a human like yourself could coexist for long-term periods of time while accepting each other's traits? Like a vampire and a human in some tragic romance. Could it happen? Ham looked back at her. No. Even with my levels of apathy, something as evil as that would have to be hunted down and stamped out. Jubilee looked almost disappointed. Yeah, I kind of figured that's what you'd say. All right, go ahead and stick the needle in me. As Ham was injecting her, the holy deity of the archivist stepped up, almost as though she was trying to interrupt what he was doing. Actually, I have something I'd like to talk to her about. Just one moment. Well, it's a little too late for that, Ham said as he pulled the needle out. Needle's empty. I would imagine you only have a minute, maybe at most. Oh, well, then I'll make it quick. Could you step away for a second? Ham looked at her almost in confusion before stepping away as he knew time was precious. Vicky then extended 4 of her wings to block everyone's view, and as much of their hearing as she could. She then got close to Jubilee to ask a question. They whispered for a moment, something Ham couldn't quite make out, before eventually Jubilee answered also in a whisper, and then Vicky backed off. She looked almost disappointed by her reply. What the hell was that about? Ham asked. Vicky replied with, I'm just asking her a personal question about myself. I figured since she worked in genetics, she might know an answer or two. She didn't. All right then, Ham said. Jubilee was starting to look a little drowsy when she looked around at everyone in the room. Hey, just so you know, I have a whole bunch of genitalia caves at my base, and all of them are filled with, well, people and not too friendly critters that would love to take a bite out of any one of you. You might want to get out of here before I go out, because I think they're all going to escape on their own the second I'm not holding them anymore. Her eyes then started to close as they heard the growling and moving amongst the trees. Something was being released, but Ham had no way of knowing what exactly it was. We should get out of here right now, Marty Jones said as they started making their way towards the exit. As they made their way out, something broke free from one of the walls of the tree. It was a large moving creature. Couldn't well be described, but was basically a horse with spider-like legs and razor-sharp fangs. It began snapping and growling as it moved about the tree, trying to look for its way out. The echoing arachnid managed to lock its eyes on the small group of people that were trying to make their way out of the tree, and began to approach when it was suddenly caught up by a flying insect-like creature. It was flying through the tunnels and had managed to lodge its stinger into the horse's brain, where it then dragged the body of the strange horse-like creature away. "Yeah, we should definitely get out of here quickly," Marty Jones said. "Understood," the First Throne replied. He pulled his sword off of his back and got around the holy deity. "Come along, let's evac quickly." Luckily, the Melted are prepared for this exact situation. "The Melted?" Ham asked. "Pretty certain we left those guys outside, didn't we?" It was then revealed that a small strand of their Melted had followed them all the way into the tree, leaving a line of their own body and suit, leading all the way outside. They quickly wrapped around the holy deity Vicky's leg, and then began to pull her furiously out of the tree. She was pulled along with the Second and First Throne, all the way out, Ham simply watching them vanish down the corridors. "Our apologies for abandoning you," the First Throne shouted, "but our priority is our holy deity." Ham started to run after them, figuring it would be a good idea to get out of the tree as soon as possible when he was scooped up by Bo, who began carrying him, princess style, over his shoulders on 2 legs, before eventually moving him to his back and switching to 4 legs. Before they knew it, they had managed to all make it out of the tree, safe and sound. Ham's eyes were somewhat stung by the artificial light coming from up above, and the application of gravity had certainly done its toll on Ring 3. No longer was there a large canopy denying the look of the artificial blue sky. As he turned his gaze back to the Blightwood tree, he couldn't help but notice not only people escaping from the tree's various orifices, but also creatures both large and small. He could have swore he saw a plesiosaurus pulling itself from large tendrils that were wrapped around it. "God," Ham said. "I can't believe that's finally fucking over." Pangea came running from around the side of the tree. She had been fighting the large tendrils of wood, trying to get to Ham, knowing that he was in somewhat danger, trying to get out of the tree. She quickly rushed to his side and picked him up. "There you are," she said. "Glad that whore's gone. Now then, are you all right?" Ham looked at the scene happening around him. Everywhere he looked, he could see some of the Fae were attempting to scoop sentient individuals out of the fray and reunite with them. He didn't know if they were family or perhaps just trying to offer charity to someone who needed it. As well, they were trying to suppress some of the more dangerous creatures that were snapping and biting at them. He then looked up at the giant synth who was holding him in the palm of her hand. He knew he still had to make it down to Ring 4 before he could land the ship properly. "No," he said. "No, I'm not all right, but it is what it is. Let's just finish cutting those roots and get our asses down to Ring 4. We need to hurry up and finish this thing." Ham sat stoically on his personal device, working and approving the projects as they were done. They stayed on Ring 3 for another day or 2, before eventually making their way back to the core of the ship. The entire time, Ham was nearly unapproachable for any matter that wasn't related directly to work. End of Chapter 8. Thank you all so much for listening to The Legends of Thea thus far. I've really enjoyed working on this project, and don't forget to check out the artist who assisted me with some of the visuals in conjunction with this chapter. Please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. And if possible, don't forget to check me out on Twitter. That's where I post many of the source images that I use in conjunction with these videos. I hope you all enjoy your day, and thank you very much. For now, I'm going to have to be saying bye-bye.